Happy Friday, everybody. Yes, indeed, we're back. We're really live. And more importantly, my voice is back. Hi, everybody. I'm the founder of Pro Cannabis Media, Jimmy Young, and I'm so happy to be here talking with you and asking you to please don't mute me, okay? Because that's what I was doing for 72 hours last week when I had no voice. And if you don't have a voice, you can't host a talk show. This is the last Friday of the June month, and that means we are going to be talking with Brooke Westlake from the Women in Cannabis Expo, and she has done an amazing job putting together not one, not two, not three, but 4 panels over the next 2 hours to talk about. Brooke, great to see you, and thank you so much for your hard work and support.
Well, thank you, Jimmy, for having me on again. I love co-hosting with you. We've got our show dates ready for July and August for us to co-host. And yes, we have 4 fantastic panels with 8 amazing women in the cannabis industry. And I can't wait for all of you to meet them. Some of them I've met in person, some I haven't yet, but I have talked with all of these amazing women, and I can't wait for you guys to hear them and their passion and their companies and all the things that they're doing.
I love the upbeat energy that flows from you naturally. I think that's awesome. All right, let's bring in both of them because they're both here now. Dr. Bridget Williams is here, and I got to tell you, I love promptness. You were right on the button at 4 o'clock, Dr. Bridget. So thank you for joining us. And Terry Gerbs is also with us as well. And Brooke, I'm going to allow you to make the intros and kind of dictate the conversation. How's that?
You got that. So I am so excited for our first panel discussion where we have Terry Gerbs with us and Dr. Bridget Williams. Terry was one of our amazing speakers last year at Women in Cannabis Expo at our Las Vegas event, and then she joined us for our 4th and final one of the year. Dr. Bridget Williams has an extensive background, and we've been trying to figure out which event she's going to be at. We're going to make it happen, but I'm going to pass the baton on. We'll start with Terry to give her introduction, a little short bit about what she's been doing in the cannabis space, and we'll go over to Dr. Bridget Williams, and then we'll just start firing off some questions and having a little chat.
All right.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for having me today. I really enjoy our conversations as always. Terry Gerbs, I'm the founder of F3 HR Consulting. We are a HR consulting firm out of Fresno, California, serving the entire United States or employers throughout the United States with their employment law and compliance to ensure that they reduce their risk of lawsuits and penalties and have a wonderful workplace, right? Because that's so important. In the cannabis space, I support women in cannabis. I support you and your beautiful organization, and I'm a member of other organizations as well. And I support cannabis employers and their employees, not only in California, but throughout the United States.
We are so happy to have you, and thank you for everything that you do. Let's get an introduction from Miss Dr. Bridget Williams. How are you today?
Great. How are you? I'm so happy to be here and to connect with you again. So it's a great opportunity.
Yeah, thank you. So tell us, give us an introduction and part of your background, and then we'll start having a little chit chat.
Sure. So first and foremost, I'm a family physician. I spent about 20 years at the Cleveland Clinic before deciding and learning about cannabis and what it could do. And so I created my own offices, Green Harvest Health in Ohio, and now I have Dr. Bridget MD, which is in Ohio, as well as Michigan. A lot of my time is spent with education. And so we have our book, Courage in Cannabis, which was the #1 bestseller in 2021. And I swear in a 2 to 3 weeks, we'll be coming out with book 2. The book thing will definitely drive me a little crazy, but we're very excited about Courage in Cannabis Volume 2 coming out. And so my focus is always education and changing the stigma. And I do a number of things in the area. I'm at a street fair today with my my CBD company and with the book. And so I'm hiding so that I can come and talk to you today.
Well, thank you for joining us. I think both of your guys, I love how I did the panels a little differently, and I really put the women in panels where their backgrounds were very diverse, like we're all in cannabis, right? But I love the fact that we have Terry here from the accounting and the business aspect. And I absolutely love that you are not only a woman in cannabis, but in healthcare. I have a 20-year background in healthcare. I was a surgical tech. I think we need more doctors on board to help educate patients for this alternative medicine. Not just recreational fun. We've got absolute medical need here for individuals. So my question to both of you is, why did you guys go into the cannabis industry? Was there like an inspiration? Was there a story? Was it always a passion? What was the reason why? Let's start with Terry.
Well, in 2019, I was invited to attend the MJ BizCon, and by my employer, we were going to go get new business, or at least go tackle, the show and see what we can do to help employers succeed. And I loved it. I loved it. I've known about cannabis, of course, all my life, but I never had delved into the community and the industry that is cannabis. And I just love all of the people that are affected by this industry. It's not only, people think cannabis and it's a dispensary, but there is so much, from lighting to lighters to, dispensaries, everything. Everybody's touched by cannabis, and I just love that. And there's so much opportunity. It's a great emerging market, and it's important to be able to support those employers, because the cannabis industry, as we all know, had a little, it's starting to regulate now, right, in the recent years, and there wasn't systems in place or HR systems in place to support the employer and the employee. So I'm happy to be able to do that for them.
I love that. And I say oftentimes, even with the expo, having an event company, and I was supposed to have a lab, there's no blueprint. We don't have blueprints. I'm currently, I got a book deal and I'm working on a book, and I'm showcasing and sharing a lot of the stuff that you mentioned. It's an amazing emerging market, but like you said, there were no some of these setups. And I think what's so great about having both you and Dr. Bridget Williams on here today is that you might have nurses that are coming to you and saying, hey, can you connect me with a doctor? And here is a woman-owned business company. She's had multiple companies in the cannabis space. And you can go, yeah, I know an amazing doctor who's got books, and she's an advocate, and she's had her own companies. And so thank you for all that you're doing on the HR side, because every piece of the puzzle in the cannabis industry is really, really important for business and for it to function well. And so now let's hear from Dr. Bridget Williams. What inspired you? How did you get into cannabis? And thank you for being a doctor in cannabis and educating people. Amen.
Absolutely. I appreciate that. It really was way too early in my career that I began to really question and became dissatisfied with the current model of medicine. For every 15 minutes I'm seeing a patient, I'm probably only spending 7 or 8 minutes sometimes with them at best. And, it was diagnosis pill all day. I had one patient who was really interested in doing something different. I started working with her for her diabetes, her breast cancer. She mentioned cannabis as an option. This was probably even more than 15 years ago, I'm thinking, but I really was like, there's no way, cannabis can't be medicinal. And so I started looking up things to, make sure she understood why she was wrong. Of course, in the process, a lot of potential in using this medicinally. She started making edibles, she started smoking. I started learning about dosing and titration and how it would relate to her other medications. And at that period of time, it was really hard to dig up a lot of this information. But I saw her health change in a way that none of my other patients were changing. And so that was that moment for me. And so when it became legal and the options developed in Ohio, I knew that I was going to participate on some level. I didn't know I would open my own offices, but I was also disappointed with a lot of the card companies because they were literally card companies. When I had an opportunity to work with one, and I started talking about treatment and titrations and research and surveys, and they said, no, we are cards for cash. That's all we do. And so that's when I said it's time for me to practice medicine the way I've always wanted to. And so that was my moment.
I absolutely love that. Yeah.
Can I ask a question of the doctor? The book that you wrote, The Courage in Cannabis, multiple stories about people's experiences with this plant medicine. Is there one in particular that stands out to you?
Oh God. I'm really caught up into book 2. Right? There's so many, they all stand out to me. I will tell you that the one that's asked about the most, which I can say is a woman who, was on 16 different medications living in Texas. Really, a young woman that was nearly bedridden at some point. A lot of autoimmune disorders and what have you, was not a pro-cannabis person whatsoever. And a friend of hers said, why don't you try this? And she was nearly bedridden at the time, and it completely changed her life. I met her at a cannabis conference, and when I really understood her story, she's such a vibrant, bubbly, person, and I couldn't believe that, she had been that sick. And that cannabis, without that, I don't know where I think she would be completely disabled, without a doubt. And so I think that's the story that people ask me about the most.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's so powerful. And
I got one for Terry too. Then you can take back over, right?
No, you're good.
There's a lot of reports of the cannabis industry in California and across the United States with different MSOs kind of contracting. It's a market correction going on in this industry right now. Capital is dried up. It's getting tougher and tougher to get into the industry. What are you finding as far as this market correction? Are there still opportunities out there for people to get into this industry?
Oh,
Terry.
definitely. More than likely, for sure. There's plenty of opportunity in the cannabis industry. You still have your retailers that need your bud tenders. You still have your growers that need experienced or non-experienced employees that are trainable in order to be able to do their job. So there's plenty of jobs in the market, for sure. There is.
That makes us all feel better. Go ahead, Brooke.
I was gonna say, well, you can't spell healthcare without the THC in the middle of the word. Ooh. And much like Dr. Bridget Williams explained about having a patient, when I came into the industry, I was non-cannabis using. It was a very foreign idea to me, but the same year that I almost died, and it's now literally keeping me alive. And so I can attest to the benefits of it, not only just in a business aspect, but physically. I'm living because of it today, because I'm missing a whole section of my colon and I don't have a nutrition valve. And it literally helps me keep food down. So thank you for educating patients and everything that you're doing. And Terry, thank you for bringing more women into the industry. We definitely need that. My other question for both of you is, how do we get more women? Like, Jimmy was just mentioning, we got capital drying up. We've got this shift of alignment of the market all over the US, California very specifically. How do we get more women into this industry we already have all this red tape and all these hurdles? What do you guys think about that? We'll start with Terry.
Okay.
I can tell you that there's many women in cannabis. I think the issue is the opportunities that we have, funding opportunities, etc. Right? This week I was on a panel for the WEIC, and because they're having a funding event, classes for women, right? And they're teaching women what they need to get funded, and it's a journey, right? It's not as easy as saying, hey, I need $1 million to start a business. That doesn't work that way. There's a road to the madness of being funded and being educated, not letting anybody take advantage of you, right? Because who knows, we may not have the support that we need in order to better understand what the industry is like. But
Yeah.
I think there's many women in the industry. It's a matter of helping each other out, right? First, that's what we're here for, to ensure that we have resources for everybody and that they are ready for the next step in order to be successful within the industry.
Yeah, absolutely. Dr. Bridget Williams, what do you think on that? How do we get more women? I mean, are you talking to more nurses? Do you go to medical healthcare conferences and encourage more doctors and women and nurses to come into this space and help educate women on this as, medical use or a career path?
Absolutely. So I definitely, I think about 5 years ago when talking to another physician, they literally just turned their nose up at me and did not even want to hold a conversation, where now they are reaching out and they want to understand their patients better. And so we are making some progress. I think for women, particularly women make up 80% of the 80% of the health decisions in their home, whether it's for their spouse, their children, their parents, what have you. They're making 80% of the health decisions. And I think particularly for women, we often feel we need to have some level of education understanding or certification to have some authority, which is not necessarily true, but we do feel that way, right? And so the more educational opportunities that we have in the cannabis space, the more women I think we'll have in this space. I feel right now, and this is something that's kind of hit me in the last couple of months, that for the amount of education that we do have, a lot of it is inward facing, meaning it's for people that want the job in the industry or the enthusiast that wants to know more. But we need to have more education for the person that would never be seeking this out in the first place. We need to have more education for the healthcare provider that doesn't necessarily want to do this themselves, but need to know more so they can help their patients. We've been turned in way too much for too long, and we need to be bold enough and confident enough to now be talking to the most unlikely person so that we can strengthen what we do.
Can I ask a question about education? And I was just at the CWCB. There were 12 colleges and universities there that have cannabis, either certificate programs or for credit programs. And I want to ask you guys, are we starting to see it in med schools yet?
Yeah. So you're seeing more with pharmacology, and you're seeing more with general hemp programs, agricultural programs, than you are in the medical schools themselves. The last research project that I saw was that I think it was, an incredibly small amount of medical schools that were putting this into their curriculum. But the fact of the matter is, this is inevitable. When it comes to cannabis, you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube, right? We're not going anywhere. It's impossible at this point. And we're only learning more and having more research. And so as the scientists, the pharmacologists, and honestly, the nursing programs are becoming more open to this, the medical schools and physicians need to open up. And that means, and I will guarantee you, when the pharmaceutical industry is already making their medications, their cannabis drugs right now, when they become FDA approved and when they're covered by insurance, all of a sudden medical schools, physicians will not, because now they'll be prescribing it. There's a medication in California right now that is approved, not anywhere else in the country, but it's approved in California. And they're looking for cannabis physicians to be able to prescribe it. We're right on the cusp of this, but I hope we do it right, is my concern.
That'd be great.
Terry, what about that question that he just asked? Are you seeing more people on the HR side come in with certificates and some kind of educational component from a university or a community college? Are you seeing that on the HR side?
Well, HR, the cannabis industry is a very peculiar industry, right? It has its own idiosyncrasies. right? So, but HR is HR throughout the nation. It's just that every state has different laws. Now, if we're talking about badges, for example, or you needing to be have a badge in order to work somewhere, etc. Some counties require it, some other counties don't. You know, it's just a mess. So in the HR side of things, we are just we provide the guidance for employment law, right? Employment law and compliance that applies to each state, which is quite vast, especially in California, where every other county or city has its own either leave law or a parental leave or even minimum wage, right? So California has its own beast when it comes to that, but we're all ready and able to support the cannabis industry for sure.
Well, we definitely need more education. I think that we're definitely going to see more certificate programs, and at the university level, I think Dr. Bridget Williams is spot on. Once it's approved FDA and you've got these other things, then all other things kind of fall in line, and then all of a sudden now you can get your bachelor's in pharmaceutical and cannabis, which it needs to be there, but of course it's kind of like what comes first, the chicken or the horse, or the egg, and how do you want to navigate? And like you said, every state has something different. That's, I think, another issue that comes up is because it's still not federally legal. It goes from state down to county, down to, it's like this trickle down effect, like you said. So my final question for the both of you, and then Jimmy might have one more as well, is where do you both see the cannabis industry 10 years from now? This is a good one, right? This is like, this is the Jeopardy.
That's a good question. I mean, we've come a long way in the last 5 to 10 years. Imagine what's possible next, right? That we won't have, so then when we go to the dispensary, our cannabis won't be taxed, 30-40% first. Let's work on that. The cannabis dispensaries are you can die because of all of the taxes that states impose on the purchase of cannabis. It's not cheap, when you go to the dispensary. So hopefully we can work on that, lowering the prices of the product so that it can be available to more people. And just in all, as it relates to HR, educating the cannabis owner and the employees on just that because you work in cannabis doesn't mean that we can be smoking cannabis all day at work, et cetera, et cetera. There's safety regulations and all of these things that we need to abide by. So hopefully the industry can shift to be more of a company versus just a cannabis or a pod or marijuana like everybody else would call it, right? That we have progress in that area where we're all in the same page and we're doing the same thing so that we don't have the stereotype, right? And that's huge. That's huge for people, oh my gosh, I can't go into a dispensary because, the neighbor's going to see me or whatever, right? Or, oh, I don't want anybody to know that I smoke or ingest cannabis, right? So I'm thinking that I hope to see that we're all going to feel a lot more comfortable with the industry and its advances and what it has to offer the general population.
I agree with that 100%. What do you think, Dr. Bridget Williams?
So 10 years. I definitely think we'll have more legalization. I assume it will be national by then. I don't even want to say it because I think we've said that for a long time, right?
Yeah.
I do think on the pharmaceutical side, we'll have a number of FDA-approved, insurance-covered cannabis medications. I feel that the medical aspect of the cannabis industry will dissipate, and sick patients will go to their doctors and get these cannabis pills or whatever it is that they're offering. So then what we see now really will be a more recreational and maybe like holistic wellness at the bare minimum, but for the most part, it's going to be a recreational space, and I think the beverage industry, as far as THC, will boom incredibly, which will then level the playing field as far as, because we're a drinking drunk country. We have no issues with that, you know?
Right.
And so once THC beverages are normalized, you will be sitting across from someone with a beer, and you will have a beer too. You'll have a THC beer, they'll have and everybody will be happy, right?
Yeah.
So I definitely think the recreational side will be slightly, we're still going to be struggling a little bit, but not nearly as much. I am concerned about the medical side of it and it being completely under the pharmaceutical industry, because to be honest, the reason why we have the medical patients we have is because they were dissatisfied with the pharmaceutical industry and the current medical model. And so if they gain control of this, which they will, what's next? You know, psychedelics, I don't know, but I feel we have an opportunity to change what medicine looks like and what that model is. But we're so focused on the recreational side.
Yeah. And I don't know if you guys watch this show at all, but I rail against that word. This is a plant medicine, right? It's a plant medicine. The word recreational takes away from the fact that it's a medicine and it needs to be learned about, and we have to educate ourselves, and we have to learn how to microdose, Dr. Bridget. I heard you mention it. It's so important because the weed today is so much more strong than it used to be. And I'm talking about 30, 40 years ago. Okay. So that you don't need as much as you used to have. And yes, it is expensive, but microdosing is really where I'm starting to see a lot of development in the science world, in the research world, even in some of the retailers now. So I'm really excited about that. But we've passed 420. Which is usually the time we bring in Jonathan Edwards, and he gets to sing one of my favorite songs, Shanty, because it's 420. So I want to thank Dr. Bridget and Terry for joining us here for this half hour and getting the show off to a great start. You too, Brooke. But we are going to take a break, and then when we come back, more of Brooke's Friends on Green Rush Live. After this, don't go away.
Yeah, this is a tune that I wrote back in 19... I've forgotten. We had a saying in our old band, one of my first bands in 1966 or so. What are you going to do tonight? Oh, just... you know, like every other night, just gonna lay around the shanty and put a good buzz on. Gonna sit down in the kitchen, fix me something good to eat. Make my head a little high, make the whole day complete. Gonna lay around the shanty, oh mama, and put a good buzz on. Pass it to me, baby, pass it to me slow. We'll take time out to smile a little before you let her go. We're gonna lay around the shanty, oh mama, and put a good buzz on. You're on something. Go ahead. Rick Brodsky, everybody. Nothing to do and there's always room for more. Fill it, light it, shut up and close that door, baby. We're gonna lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on. Take it, okay. Prohibition never works, it's time to realize it. It grows in my backyard, it's time to legalize it. We're gonna lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on. I'm gonna sit down in my rented car. I'm gonna jam it into drive. Gonna head on out and play at WSCA with Sean. I'm glad I'm alive. We're gonna lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on every night and day. We're gonna lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on.
You would think that it is. However, there's quite a bit of debate right now in the accounting industry when it relates to cannabis with this exact question. I'm part of a few different networking groups that are solely accountants for cannabis companies. And there's been quite a bit of back and forth in those communities and discussion regarding whether 280E, if it went away, if the administration legalized cannabis or took it off of Schedule 1, what would happen? And it could go either way right now. The debate is it can make the accountant's life much easier. That's what a lot of the inexperienced accountants are saying right now, it seems, whereas the accountants that have been in this industry for a while and have gone through the same thing that happened with hemp a few years ago are saying that it will make lives more difficult, because when hemp became declassified a while back, the accounting became more complicated.
All right. And we are back for another edition, live edition, really live. That's what I love to do, is really live content here at Pro Cannabis Media. I'm Jimmy Young, the founder of PCM, and I'm co-hosting this week with our regular co-host of our Women in Cannabis discussion that we will be having every fourth Friday of the month on Green Rush Live, because after all, women are in the cannabis business too. Right, Brooke?
That is correct. And I'm so happy to be here again. I mean, we have an amazing lineup. We just finished with panel 1 with 2 amazing leaders in the industry, Terry Gerbs, who does HR, and then Dr. Bridget Williams, who's an MD and doing the education component. And now we have 2 more amazing panelists that hopped on. These 2 amazing women I have not met in person yet. I'm hoping that they are able to join me at some point at one of our expos, but I'm so happy that they're with us today. We have Tawnie and we also have Nicole. And so I'd like them to give an introduction of their name and their company that they work for and what role they play in that company. And then we will be off with the questions and answers for our next panel discussion. Let's start with Miss Nicole. How about we start with you?
Yeah, great to meet you, Brooke, Jimmy. Thank you for having me on. Had to check to make sure I'm not on mute. My name is Nicole Mendoza. I am calling in from Chicago, Illinois. I've been in the cannabis space for about 7 years now. I've been with Forefront Ventures for 5 of the last 7 years in this industry. I'm a product manager for Forefront Ventures, which means I execute prioritization, strategization, go-to-market, building, launching of all of our products within our portfolio. There's 21 active brands in the Forefront family of brands and over 1,500 SKUs. We have facilities in California, Massachusetts, Illinois, and Washington, and we're vertical in Massachusetts and Illinois, which means that we also have retail stores there.
So I would imagine you guys are a multi-state operator. Is that correct?
Yeah.
That's right.
Perfect.
Yeah, we're
Perfect. Love it. Miss Tawnie, let's get an introduction from you.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Tawnie Scarborough. I am VP of Corporate Development for Conception Nurseries. Conception has been around since 2018 on the West Coast, bringing tissue culture clones to the cannabis market. So clean, verified clonal stock that is representative of the genetics from our network of breeders that we license from. And I am bringing conception nurseries across the US, so bringing new tissue culture labs into established legal states in the country.
And look at your background. I feel like I want to come out there to the farm and I want to have tea and coffee with you right now. And it looks so beautiful. And so thank you for joining us, and beautiful background. So thank you for that. My first question for both of you ladies today is, have you guys had positive or negative experiences in the cannabis industry? Like you said, you've been in since 2018. And then Nicole, you mentioned you've been in for 7 years. So you guys have experience and you've been in the industry to know some of the very big ups and downs that have been challenging the market. Give us a positive or a negative experience and tell us, like, what did you learn from that? Either way.
Ooh,
We'll
pick one.
start with Nicole.
Good job, Brooke. Go ahead, Nicole.
Oh, you're on mute.
She's on mute.
Yeah.
Positive or negative experience, just like centered around being a woman, identified as a woman. I would say, fortunately for me, it's been mostly positive. I would say that at the start in 2016, I got my start in Los Angeles, California, and it was in the gray market area. You know, I was formerly a meditation and yoga teacher. So I really just got into the cannabis space to supplement my day job, which was teaching mindfulness. And there was like a natural pairing there with cannabis and mindfulness. So I stuck around, but I would say that my initial entry into the cannabis space, was within a retail setting, and they were specifically hiring young women who were, you know, dressing nicely. I don't know if you guys have heard about the dispensary. I think it's in Massachusetts, where it's a topless dispensary, where we weren't quite that. We weren't at that end of the spectrum, but there were a lot of midriffs. It was back in the day when you had your like bong bars, you know, and so there were like young women, like, you know, like, so I would say that it wasn't necessarily a negative experience. I do know why I was hired, because I fit the bill of being a young woman, but it was a little shocking for me to just see how long that culture was sustained. You know, I lived in Los Angeles for 3 years, and for the 3 years that I was there, that was the case. It wasn't until I moved back home to Chicago and got re-entered the space here, where it was mostly medical, where I started to see a different side of the industry that was a lot more wellness focused than my initial introduction was in the, I guess, the recreational colored Southern California space.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
I would say it's changed a lot since then. Nowhere have I experienced that same level of, I don't know, objectification.
Acceptance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's California. They accept pretty much everybody. That's why it's a new planet. And by the way, if there is a topless dispensary in Massachusetts and I don't know about it, somebody has to tell me where that is. Okay.
Jimmy,
Because
I've got to send it to you.
I'm not even sure that exists, because I kind of think I know a lot of these dispensaries in Massachusetts, but I definitely would be interested in talking with the ownership group of that, but let's not go there today. Let's go back to Tawnie. And Tawnie, if you had any experiences that you say, I wonder if I wasn't a woman, would this have happened?
So I personally have been in cannabis at a commercial scale since 2002, working on a farm in the Emerald Triangle, and then using the revenue that I had from that first year to invest in another property and start a solar powered farm from the ground up, and had the opportunity with my business partner at the time to build a beautiful community that had integrated animal husbandry and orchards and food production with cannabis as medicine. You know, at the end of the harvest, everybody who had been working on the farm, we would circle around the harvest and just put some prayers out to the world that this medicine can help heal. So I feel incredibly fortunate that from the beginning, my role, my relationship with cannabis and the people that I've worked with in cannabis, it didn't matter if you're a man or a woman. That said, as a woman, there's a lot of vulnerabilities that we have. There have been definitely some times where I've felt unsafe, especially before legalization. It's what incentivized me to help create the Sonoma County Growers Alliance and join the California Growers Association and work on regulatory legislative bill in 2015, and then the regulatory framework for the next couple of years, trying to undo the damage from Prop 64. And so that we could have a safe place. So there was accountability for all of the actors in this industry, which we still struggle with today, right? It's still very broken. As you see in the headlines in California, accountability may be one of the more difficult kind of attributes in maybe all business. And because cannabis is so young and there's no, we don't have a lot of meat on the bone to throw our weight around. If a business center collapses, that's it. You have no other activities, so we feel it, very quickly. But I'd say, for the most part, I feel very privileged to have such a diverse set of colleagues over the years in all of the companies that I've worked with, and actually co-founded Code Compliance and helped over 200 permit applications in the state with my co-founder, Brian Elliott, who was a retired fire chief. And for all intents and purposes, no reason to get behind cannabis, but he loved the people in cannabis, and he didn't think that, it was right the way we were being discriminated against. So his fire building code and my cannabis code combined, and we helped a lot of people build their businesses. But there's still an old, good old boys league out there. And I've definitely, as a, VP, sat in a room and had men ask me, is your boss going to come to the meeting?
Oh,
So, I think women tend to get asked if they can take the notes during the meeting. There's a lot of little things where I think these biases, they're so baked in. It's so deep in the culture in America that opportunities like this for women to come together and empower each other are really important, but so is the training for men on how to identify their biases. And again, I think transparency and accountability are really going to be the game changers for women stepping into more positions of power in the companies that are making this industry.
I feel like Jimmy has a question or something on this. We want to here's the thing. We want to thank Jimmy tremendously, because you're right, Tawnie, there is still a lot of this just way that they think of women. And I think part of that also is that we are natural born multitaskers, doing all the things. Oh, sure, let me take notes and be the VP and let me sell the contract at the same time. But it's so awesome to have men like Jimmy who really want to uplift women. And I get asked this too. I get, because my show is called Women in Cannabis Expo, and I get a man or two that will email me and say, are men allowed? And we say, yes, we want to educate you. We want you to come support your business partner, your girlfriend, your wife, your sister, your mother, whoever it is that you are working with in the space. So thank you for the transparency on that. I think that is definitely something that we're still trying to get over that hurdle, but it's going to take people like us speaking about it and people like Jimmy who help continue to uplift women and say, yes, they should be in this space. And look at all these amazing business owners we're talking to. So I absolutely love that. I would like the next question I have for both of you is, and I think you've kind of touched on this a little bit, Tawnie and Nicole, how do we get more women into the industry? Because we had a huge sharp decline after 2019. We went into COVID. That whole year basically didn't exist for a lot of us. How do we get more women into the space? Because we had 32% at C Corp level. It's down to 22%. How do we do that? Let's start with Nicole.
and she's going to unmute herself.
Yeah.
Going to have to unmute herself. Go ahead.
I think the stabilization of the industry is going to be really important if we want to grow female participation in it. I am a new mom, so I can say that as we're feeling, the headwinds face our space right now. You know, we're still a ways away from federal legalization. We're still under heavy tax burdens. If I were looking into getting into the space today as a young new mom, I would be deterred just by it not seeming like a very stable industry. And so I think that we need some financial stability. You know, we need to be able to set up structures that allow more entrepreneurship. I think diverse licensure, you know, so as we open up different types of cannabis business that can exist, you know, consumption lounges is one of them that comes to mind. I have a ton of female friends living in the big city of Chicago that are active entrepreneurs in event production, hospitality, restaurant owners, and it would be a natural fit for them to interweave cannabis into some of those experiences that they are making a living off of. And until
hang on a second. You mentioned something. I got to butt in. I'm sorry. Okay.
Yeah.
There are no private clubs or private parties where consumption is allowed in Chicago, in Illinois?
It is allowed within private spaces, but there's not a business license for consumption lounges unless you live in a township that has passed it legally. So it's on like a township basis.
Yeah.
So there is Rise Mundelein, which is a GTI owned dispensary in the township of Mundelein, which is like northwest suburbs of Chicago. They're one of the only townships in the state of Illinois. I think Champaign is another one, which is down south, that have passed consumption ordinances that allow these things to take place. But the city of Chicago and much of the surrounding townships don't.
Yeah, it's a major problem in every state. It really is. And every state has laws and everybody knows how to get around those laws. That's really what, by the way, the industry's had a lot of years of experience of getting around laws, let's just say over the last 30, 40 years of people who have used it and stuff. And I do want to give one plug out. Thank you, Brooke, for those kind words, by the way. And anybody who watches this show knows I rail about this book. I rave about it. It's called The Macho Paradox, and it's by Jackson Katz. And he is a professor at Cal Berkeley. Pretty sure it's Cal Berkeley. Hope it is. Anyway, I recommend it to all people, whether they be male or female. Men do have to call on other men or call out other men when they see examples of sexism, just like we like to do when we see examples of anti-Semitism or racism. It is time that we tell people these words and these actions hurt, and they just keep coming up and coming up. And if you don't say anything, you're perpetuating these myths and stereotypes. That's my rail. Go ahead, Brooke.
Well, this question goes to Nicole was sharing with us the different elements of how we get more women in the space. And I absolutely agree. The stabilization is critical. I entered the space in 2019, and again, 2020 was non-existent. I promoted my event for 18 months. And had it been a little more stable, you know, that's the reason why I'm doing a book. It's a tell-all. It's whistleblowing on some of the stuff that needs massive correctiveness. So the question goes back to Tawnie. How do you think, or how do you feel that we should get, or how can we get more women into the space as we see that we have a corrective market that needs to happen, that women in the C-level positions have fallen off and we're at low 22%. What do you think would be best case scenario and how we do that?
Yeah, of course, I do think that even though it has fallen, and that change, I think, is reflective of the kind of rapid commercialization of cannabis across the U.S., right? And so you just see traditional business practices infiltrating. 22% is still actually really high and still worth celebrating, and it's not good enough. But it is important to acknowledge that, you know, it's still a strong position in place for, you know, when you look across all of the industries. That said, I feel like there are a lot of women in cannabis, but what tends to be holding them back from C-suite positions, I'd say, can be one of two things, or maybe a mix of both, which is women tend to be a little bit more, they think about a business holistically, right? And are not as job title centric. They're not here to climb a ladder. They're here to build a business. They're here to contribute. And so there's a more humility that women tend to have about what their contributions are to the company. Generally speaking, I find that men are very title and pay centric. It's the motivator that drives the train, and so they tend to kind of promote and feel very comfortable asking for more. And that's something I think women culturally need to start getting more comfortable with, is knowing your value and representing yourself accordingly. Knowing what your place is in a company, and setting those objectives out in front of yourself and your manager, and saying, if I achieve this, I want to be able to be recognized in my position in this company. So that's one. And then I think the other side of that, I'll come back to accountability and transparency. So long as the performance reports are private, within one channel of a company, you have a lot of bias that can naturally happen. I actually think that Google has championed OKRs. That transparency of what is the company's objective, what is the department's objective, what is every individual contributor's objective, and are they achieving it on time and to what % of completion, makes transparency across the company on who's really contributing, and it helps with visibility amongst peers and across the different levels in the company. So we need to integrate more just professional tools in the cannabis industry that integrate transparency and accountability. And then I think more women will rise to the top.
And I think one of the biggest things that I agree 100% is that we don't value our worth. We go, oh, okay, well, I'll just do that, or I'll do this. And I'll say, coming into the cannabis space and different things, I have said, like, nope, that's not going to happen. Like, my worth is this, and this is what's going to happen moving forward. So I agree with you. We've got to, as women, men and women think differently. It's biological. We just do. Women are circular thinkers. They did a study on it, and men are linear. They make a decision and they go, and we make a decision. We're like, oh, was that the right one? Was it not? Was it, all the things. So I agree with all of that. I think that's amazing. Jimmy, do you have a question for these two amazing women?
So I was listening. That's the best part, is that I get to sit back and listen. I want to know, are there women in cannabis networking events inside the industry? Because a lot of the industry in Massachusetts, we have networking events all the time. And when I go to these things, it's usually the same groups of people. And it's pretty much 50-50, to be honest, male and female, which is good. But I just wonder if there are specific women in cannabis networking events, or maybe even webinars or something like that, Brooke.
So I know, and Nicole might actually have some experience with this, I'm not sure. I know there's a very large group of women in the Chicago region, and they have like a chapter organization. There's also Women Grow. My show is the only women in cannabis show that's eccentric towards women. I have not seen anything else. I have seen some of the bigger event companies are now kind of embracing and having more of like a woman's night or something like that. But I have not seen other shows traditionally like what we do for our trade show at all in the industry. And I think that's partly because it's still so new and up and coming. But I love seeing places like Chicago and Women Grow and different organizations that are trying to have like a network, in your hometown, in your state, in your city. And then that way you have women to call on and have that support. I don't know what Tawnie and Nicole's experience is, but like I mentioned, Nicole might know of the one in Chicago. It's a huge, huge group of women. And that's why we were looking originally at hosting one of our shows in Chicago this year, which we are curtailing that, and we are hosting them both in Nevada. But Nicole, do you have any experience with that group that's in Chicago?
Yeah, absolutely. It's the Illinois Women in Cannabis. I don't know if we would call it a club or a group. They have a board, they're an established nonprofit. They do a conference every spring, and they throw mixers every fall, and their attendance, I would say, is 70-30, sometimes 60-40, female dominated, but tons of male support. The board is made up of all cannabis professionals, like folks in manager positions and above that are active in the space. And they also just this year recently rolled out a mentorship program, because we're coming out of that initial phase of social equity licenses being distributed in Illinois. There were a ton of those mentees in their program. And so, like Brooke said, the group itself, IWC is the acronym, is growing and year over year finding more ways to make an impact.
Tawnie, what about you? Have you had experience in like Women Grow? I know they're kind of national and you have different leaders. And have you had experience with any women organizations in California where you're at, or people wanting to create one out there like I've done?
Right. Yeah, I think Blunt Brunch is also another women event that is circulating around the US. And I remember when Women Grow got started, after Colorado had legalized, and there's and there was a chapter here in Sonoma County. I think the networking events are critical for women to get together and be able to meet and inspire one another. And I look forward to women networking events that are a little bit more business strategy, business development oriented. I find that most of the events are really uplifting women's empowerment and very social in nature, but we need more structured business meetings as women across the industry.
Agreed, 100%. Part of what we focus on at ours is not only do we have the exhibitors, but yes, we have the empowerment and the movement, and ours is the education component too, of women sharing and talking about the business aspects and the stories. And I 100% agree with that. Before we wrap up with both of you, wonderful panelists, number 2 on our show today, any last thoughts, words of wisdom for a woman who wants to go into this industry? Miss Nicole, any words of wisdom?
I would so one of my initial mentees within this company, she's no longer with the company. As I was growing, my professional trajectory was like growing exponentially, because we went from 1 state to 5 states, like massively within a year. And so I was put into all these positions, plugged in. We were small, we were agile. One of her pieces of advice to me that I still hold on to today, and this was 4 years ago, she said, at the end of every day, write down what you learned, write down what you did, practice speaking about the skills that you're obtaining, the metrics that you're learning how to track. She's like, and then you'll have this entire journal that you can reflect on when it comes to your 6-month review, your annual review. And you will, she's like, right now you're learning so much, which is true. It's like drinking from a fire hose. I mean, the compliance aspect alone from state to state is just so much. So it's something that I started then, and I feel like maybe I have material for a book. But my background wasn't in business. My background was in science. But 5 years with Forefront has been the best business school that I've ever been to. And the way that I've been able to retain that information has been through that daily reflection just on my professional learnings.
I love that. Tawnie, what about you? What about words of wisdom or something that would help inspire women in this industry or be in the industry?
Yeah, I think above all, know your worth and own it. Be proud of it and bring your gift to the industry. People always want to know how to get in. Bring your talent, bring your skills, bring your passion, and you will find the thing that fits within this industry. But it begins with knowing your worth.
Hey, that's why I started this place. I still don't know what
so
my worth is,
Jimmy.
by the way, but I definitely knew there was a void in talking openly and professionally about the cannabis industry and giving them a forum. And I'm so happy that you two joined us, and I thank you very much. We will come back after this break with 2 more panelists, more of Brooke's friends on Green Rush Live after this. Don't go away. It's a whole new world of weed out there, isn't it? Everyone is learning new ways to titrate, ingest, consume, imbibe, and engage with this plant medicine we call cannabis. Hi, I'm Jimmy Young, the founder of Pro Cannabis Media and the host of In the Weeds, and once in a while, the really live business cannabis talk show we call Green Rush on Friday afternoons from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. Eastern. I've been a medical patient in Massachusetts for almost 10 years now. I remember my first trip to a dispensary just outside of Boston, and I told the bud tender I didn't want to smoke it anymore. So I tried edibles, then tinctures, then vaping, and now if I'm going to smoke, I only use the Weedgets filtration system. What? The Weedgets.com, Weedgets, that's weed, W-E-E-D, G-E-T-S.com, is where you'll find the planet's coolest product.
Both cool the smoke from 1300 degrees to just 90 into your lungs. Plus, the maze pipe and pre-roll filters get rid of all the gunk that you just don't want in your lungs if you can help it.
Add in the code of PCMTV and you get 15% off. So just go to Weedgets.com and check out the best way to enjoy a cooler smoke with less coughing and hacking and more peace of mind. All that resin and tar is collected in the polyurethane filters that are easy to clean with soap, water, and a few Q-tips. Your lungs will thank you, and so will I.
We are a cultivation through to consumption lifestyle brand for the cannabis industry. Of course, the crown jewel in our product line is the Armoire home grow system. So now with Green Goddess Supply, we can take you everywhere from growing it in the Armoire right through to storing it, consuming it, rolling it, storing it, you name it, A to Z. Our goal is to enable everybody and anybody anywhere to be able to produce their own organic flower quickly, easily, discreetly, and inexpensively.
And welcome back to Green Rush Live, the really live talk show about the cannabis business on Pro Cannabis Media. I'm Jimmy Young, the founder of Pro Cannabis Media. So happy to offer the fourth Friday of every month to Brooke and her friends so they can talk about women in cannabis, because I think it's a very important subject. And I'd also like to see more and more women getting involved with this medicine, this plant medicine. And if you know anything about this plant medicine, there's a reason why the flower that works is female. Okay, it's very simple to me. And as soon as I heard that, as soon as I understood that there was actually a difference between a female plant and a male plant, I said, women should be more active in this industry. So Brooke, introduce your two new friends for this panel for the next 30 minutes. And I enjoyed it. I love the fact that we have a chief science officer on, because I have very good questions for that person.
You know what? We've made it very diverse today, and I think that our lineup so far has been amazing. And now we're heading into the second hour of our show with two more amazing panelists. We have Susan Burns with us and Alisha Holloway, and I'm going to let them do their introductions of who they are and what they're doing in the industry. And then we're going to start firing off question and answer. And it sounds like Jimmy's got questions right out the gate for both of you ladies. So let's start with Susan. Give us your introduction of who you are, what you're doing in cannabis, and then we'll pass that baton on to Alisha.
Sure. I'm so delighted to be here. Thank you for the invitation, and nice to be with all of you. And I agree, Jimmy, this is a super important aspect of the cannabis business, and there should be more women in cannabis. I do a number of things in the industry. I'm a lawyer and I'm a business lawyer. And so I work with cannabis businesses in growth mode. Most of my clients are businesses that are owned by women or BIPOC individuals. And right now I've been working mostly in the hemp industry. We have a very robust hemp market in Minnesota, which is where I'm located. I have a small boutique law firm named S. Burns Legal. And I also am the producer of a podcast. Well, I don't produce it, I host it. It's Bodacious Women in Cannabis. So check that out, and love to have more guests. And I think this audience would be a good audience for that.
I'm not available though. Okay.
You're not?
No. Not, I don't qualify. It says give women a chance to talk, for crying out loud. I'm sorry. Sorry.
Yeah, well, you wouldn't necessarily fit the bodacious woman category.
That's okay. I support the bodacious woman. How's that? All right.
That's awesome.
Susan. Is Susan next? Or is that, wait.
Alisha.
No, that Susan
Alisha.
just,
Oh, it's
Susan Burns was my name.
sorry,
Alicia's-
my bad.
Yeah,
Thank you.
that's okay.
Alisha.
Hi, I'm really excited to be here today. Thank you so much for the invitation, and also excited to be on this panel with Susan Burns. My background is I'm a biologist, and I have worked in model systems and humans. I'm a data scientist with a focus on genomics. And so what I was doing, back before cannabis was more about looking at human health related human diseases and trying to identify genes and variants of genes that were causing disease. And so when I saw that cannabis was being legalized, I thought this was a great opportunity to bring all of that kind of work to cannabis to really understand how we can make better plants in cannabis. And so I'm the CSO at Phylos, and we are a breeding and crop science company. We're really out there to make new plants that work better for growers. And so we have F1 hybrid seeds. Happy to talk about that if you want, but it's allowing cannabis to move into seed grown plants instead of just clonal cultivars. And then we also are working a lot with rare cannabinoids. So trying to move beyond just high potency THC plants, but also incorporating all those other secondary metabolites that cannabis has got in it for all kinds of health and wellness uses.
That's great. I can't get enough of CBN and CBG, to be honest with you. The CBD thing is what I want to talk about, though, because the FDA wants to regulate it. Now, I want to ask you, is this going to help the industry or kill it? I mean, it's going to help the testing labs because all of a sudden they have to test for just CBD too, right? I need to know. Go ahead, Alisha. You're the chief science officer.
I think it depends on how they do it. It could limit the kinds of products that are out there at first before those products go through appropriate testing that will be required. So I think that it could slow us down a little bit, but eventually will bring cannabis into a more regulated framework and provide more safety and efficacy trials for different cannabinoids, and including CBD. It's a mixed bag.
I agree with that, and I think it also depends on if there's a pharmaceutical company that, like with Epidiolex in CBD. So if somebody once the testing is done, clinical testing, and they put their stamp on it as developing a pharmaceutical, that slows it way down for everybody, limits the market. So it just depends on how they do it and where they go. Sorry.
Yeah. No, I was going to have you answer that because I was going to say, I bet Susan has some insight on that, being an attorney, being a business attorney in the industry. Like, what were your thoughts on that? And I think both of you guys are both spot on that. What has inspired both of you? You guys have obviously been in the industry a long time. What has inspired you, each of you, to be in this industry? Person, company, personal, whatever you want to share with us. We'll start with Susan and then we'll go to Alisha.
Okay, thanks. All of the above. And Alisha, I have tons of questions for you too. But so I went back to school and to obtain a legal master's degree, a specialized degree in food and agricultural law and policy. I graduated in 2018, coincidentally, when the Farm Bill was passed and hemp was deregulated or taken off this schedule, eliminated from this Schedule 1 of the Controlled Substances Act, so therefore was legal federally. And that piqued my interest. But then the personal, I think, and what I've noticed in talking to women in bodacious women in cannabis is there's always a personal component to it. And for me, it was no different. I had chronic neck pain, and a friend of mine said, here, I just came back from Colorado, try this. And it was CBD, CBG, THC combination, and I took just a third of whatever, I think was 10 milligrams. I took just a third. I slept through the whole night for the first time ever in years, and I was pain-free for 2 days. And so to me, it was a miracle. And that's what I was interested anyway, but that's what really snapped my head fast and made me go focus on in the industry. And I have to say, it's the most fascinating area of the law I've ever been involved in my decades of practice. It is, and the people in the industry, the most amazing people, so creative. It's just been a joy.
That's nice.
So what about you?
Yeah, I agree with all of that. You know, we have conversations sometimes, you know, when we're in a meeting and we're like, can you believe we get to do this? It's amazing. And, you know, that's part. So, okay, I think that two main facets really drew me to cannabis. One was my background in population genetics and really wanting to understand how genes make certain traits expressed. And so I saw cannabis as really greenfield in that, like getting right in there and starting to say, okay, here's the cannabinoid pathway. How can we alter which cannabinoids are produced and, you know, bring back some of those profiles of plants that probably were in land races a long time ago, but maybe we've lost, maybe we haven't found again. So all of that was really exciting to me, bringing in disease resistance and things like that. So the plant breeding side of and genetics of cannabis was really exciting. But then, you know, kind of on the flip side, it's the best of both worlds because we can look at the clinical side and how is the plant and how are those cannabinoids impacting health and wellness. And so now that we can do so much more research in cannabis, we can really start to go there. And so, you know, kind of all of my interests rolled into one. And, you know, my family has a long history with cannabis use, even back during Prohibition. And we saw it as a medicine. And so, you know, it kind of speaks to me on every level. I think maybe what Susan was saying.
I think that's true. You know, I've had that experience. I did not have the longevity experience, and some people know part of my journey and my story that I went into the industry at the end of 2019, and then it came full circle in my life after a near-death experience of losing a whole section of colon in 2020 and not being able to eat. And starting, as Jimmy mentioned earlier, we were talking about microdosing, and microdosing is so critical because I'd had such a bad experience at 18. You got good cannabis or bad cannabis. There was no in between. And so, yes, it's crazy to me because I was a dare kid and I'm like, I get to do this for a living. I get to meet all these amazing women. I get to work with Jimmy. I get to host events around the country. And so I would agree with you, Alisha, very much so on that statement of it's amazing in so many different ways. For both of you, where do you think there should be room for improvement in the cannabis industry? We've had some hurdles, I think, if you look at different states like California. What do you guys each collectively, independently think about where room for improvement in the cannabis industry should be focused on for maybe the next 5 years? And we'll start with Susan.
Okay, well, I have a lot to say about that. First of all, we definitely need the Safe Banking Act or some form of that to pass. I mean, it's criminal what cannabis businesses have to go through. And when we're talking about cannabis, I think we're referring to the marijuana element of the plant because there's hemp and marijuana. Marijuana is still a Schedule I substance, so it's federally illegal. And so we have Minnesota became the 23rd state to legalize adult use just this last May. But so it's still illegal. It would be helpful to the industry as a whole to have some uniform federal guidance to have the legality. But first and foremost, we need the banking to be so that there are so many legitimate businesses that, you know, some are still doing cash and that's hard. The other thing is there's a concerted effort to push the hemp industry out of the market. And I think that we really need to work hard to preserve the hemp industry. there's room for both hemp and marijuana, and microdosing or lower doses, because the hemp can only be 0.3% THC. So it's a much tamer and needed derivative of the cannabis plant. And so I think that's another area where we really need to focus and make sure that all those businesses can stay alive and active. It's an industry that has a lower entry point, a lower barrier to entry. It's not as expensive to get into it. And so it's a ripe industry for a lot of women and people of color. And so I think by pushing that out, we're eliminating a whole segment of the market and the ability of that segment of business people to build, create, and maintain legacy wealth and provide a much needed service. So those are be my three things.
I want to just touch on the hemp part real quick. Hemp is great for building material, housing, paint, clothing. And so you're right. It should absolutely not be pushed out. It is something that we can utilize in so many other ways and eliminate plastic and move forward with something natural, organic that Mother Nature made for us. It's here. Why are we not using it? So thank you for mentioning.
But also, I don't think it's not so much the industrial side that's being pushed out. It's more the edibles and the consumables market that's being, and smokables.
Yeah.
And
Alisha, what about you?
illegal, because a lot of those CBD products that are allowed in gas stations, don't buy it. Sorry.
No, this is the one thing I tell them. Verify that it is tested. It should have a QR code. You should be able to go back to the actual, and Alisha she'll touch on this because she's a bioscientist, so she knows that you should be able to go back and have a document that you can verify that lab, you can verify all the testing. If it's CBD, it should be at 0.30 or less. If it is over, it's not
THC.
The THC should be 0.30 or less, but absolutely verify if you do purchase, because a lot of people do that. And so I say, make sure you can verify it's lab tested. If you can't, then do not buy it at all, period.
Yeah, and I think tying that in with something that Susan said, that descheduling or rescheduling cannabis will go a long way to protecting consumers and moving cannabis, some of it out of the illicit market into the legal regulated market, where we're testing for pesticides, heavy metals, molds, things like that, and just bring a lot more safety to consumers. But on that same front, descheduling or rescheduling will do the two other things, which, if we can deschedule or reschedule at 3 or above, cannabis businesses will not be held hostage to the 280E requirements. And so I think that that's really important just for the health of the industry. I mean, it's incredible what we have to go through, paying taxes and just working with other regular businesses. I mean, how many banks do you have to go through? How many times can you hear from your HR software that they're not going to support you because you work in cannabis? And so, I think that will go a long way. I got involved with the Coalition for Cannabis Scheduling Reform, and they're very connected with what the administration and the FDA are trying to do with looking at descheduling or rescheduling, and we're amassing a body of work that really shows why cannabis should be descheduled or rescheduled. And more of that's going to come out in the next week or so. So I encourage you to look up CCSR when you get a chance. But I think that also will speak to some long-standing discrimination related and racism related to cannabis. And we have a lot of work to do in the industry on diversity, inclusion, and equity. Historically, Black and Brown people have been disproportionately arrested, charged, incarcerated for even just minor cannabis offenses compared to white people. And, you know, now many states have legal cannabis, so we've got to work on expungement. I know it's happening in several states. It's happened in Oregon. So there's a lot of work to do there.
You know, I think it's important. Oh, sorry. I thought you were done.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
it's good.
You go
I'm
ahead.
done.
No,
I'm
but
done.
I think those are really important points that you raised. And I also think we need to be careful, because just making cannabis legal does not get rid of the legacy or illicit market. Because in areas where we have so many regulations, so many taxes, it pushes it out of financial reach for many consumers who really need it and benefit from it. And that's one other reason the hemp market right now especially is so important, because you can create similar products, not the same, but you know, for lower cost, because you don't have the 280E problems. And until we get to a point where we can normalize it in the market place and stop creating all these barriers because of some boogeyman marijuana thing, you know, I think, and I don't think that legalizing eliminates racism or anything of that nature. I think in states where it's legal, they still show that there's a higher rate of arrest for the illegal. So I think it's for us to say that we think legalizing is going to eliminate racism or the illegal market or the illicit market, I think is a misnomer. But I think those are all facets of the industry. And I think that we need to work toward more, which is the equity piece, is why I like the hemp industry, because it's a much saner industry anyway.
It's going to be
in my experience.
No, and you know, one of the things that I hear from women, and we've talked about this a lot, is I think that they've tried in the industry as a whole with the DEI and social equity, but what I'm seeing on the other side is they're setting those people up for failure. So I don't even think giving a social equity, now those people still don't have access to funding. They still, that, you know, you have to qualify by having a record. Well, when you have a record and then you're going to people and they're like, well, wait, you have a record. Well, now I don't want to, you know, give money or contribute to your business. It's almost like exchanging out a new Jim Crow law and placing that on them. We do need prison reform. We've had too many people arrested and serving time, life sentences for cannabis. It's natural. It's a plant. It's here to help us. It's not going anywhere. But I agree, Susan, if we legalize it, it's not going to make all of the problems go away. It's collectively as a group that we have to educate each other and support each other and break down those barriers that are there. And, you know, I've had a lot of talk with women with the social equity piece, and that is actually hurting some companies that I know of. It's not helping them. They're not able to raise money. Once they have this label of now their social equity, they're like, people don't want to contribute. So there's a lot of work to be done. I agree with both of you. And I think together we have to do it together as a team. And
I agree that legalization is not a magic pill, but all of those pieces coming together with the concerted efforts that we're making. I mean, I know that we do things at Phylos that try to bring in more diversity. We try to make sure that we are paying equitably by publishing the salary ranges with job listings. We're making contributions to historically underutilized businesses, seed contributions. So, I mean, it's the whole package that's going to make a difference.
That's why I want to get to normalization or legalization. And the first step is descheduling and decriminalizing this plant medicine. And I really hope that does happen. But I do want to talk about the elephant in the room, and that is the legitimacy, no disrespect to you, Susan, okay, of these test results. Because here in Massachusetts, we are right in the middle. We're always in the middle of all sorts of things that nobody agrees about. But people go into these dispensaries, they're buying based on THC percentage. So we have to educate them that doesn't mean that particular flower strain is going to get you higher than the one that has less THC percentage. Okay. It's the terpenes that dictate the power of these cannabinoids. And we try to educate as many people as we can on this. But now I'm finding out that there is some, let's just say, illicit backdoor deals going on with testing labs that are falsifying records and test results. So this human behavior, once again, is always looking for ways around things to make it easier or better or whatever the reason is. Are we ever going to get to the point where people understand how the plant is made and what actually, and also how legitimate are these test results? And so I got to ask the question directly to ask Alisha.
Yeah, I think that there are two parts to this. So one, you could take the same flower and crush it up and have like a nice big batch and send it to 10 different labs, and you would probably get 10 different numbers. Right. So there's inherent variation in the testing equipment. And then you have folks that are trying to boost potency numbers by, adding in a little bit to their samples, and those post as higher numbers. So there's that kind of behavior. And then even within a lab, when you go in and you calibrate a machine, you can change the potency results by several percentage points. So I think that all of that means that cannabis potency is probably a range. It's plus or minus something larger than what is posted in, that the reports of what that error is. And it's definitely something that that consumers have to watch out for. I think there have been some good studies that have shown that some labs are more reliable than others. And as we move to a point where we have consistent regulation on how things are measured, that we'll get to a point where there's more consistency between the labs. There will always be some amount of variation, but we'll get to a point of more consistency.
Is there a standard permissible variation? Because there usually is with any testing that we standardize, like permissible parts per million with a plus or minus of X percent. In your experience, Alisha, is there like 10% variance? Is it 25%? What's permissible?
Yeah, it depends on what test it's talking about. If it's heavy metals, then that's regulated differently, and it's different state by state. So typically labs are reporting what their error is. How reliable that is varies by lab. It's like variance on variance.
I know I'm not conducting the interview here, but I'm just curious. Do you have any thoughts on what it should be?
Oh gosh. It just depends on the equipment and the calibration. I think as long as for the higher levels of cannabinoids, if we're within 1 or 2 percentage points, that's kind of all I can hope for. That's not what they're reporting. They're reporting much tighter variance than that. I don't think I have a great answer.
So when I got into the space, I was supposed to have a testing lab, which I still don't have, state issue law, all these things, right? But I worked very closely with a lab here in town. And one of the things that their biologists and their chemists were sharing with me is, every state also has different parameters for testing. And so that also throws numbers and different things off. But one of the scientists was telling me the amount that is tested in Nevada, he said the amount needed to be a bigger amount. He said it was like too small to actually have more like the legitimate numbers. So uniformity across the board for all states that have legalization, recreational, and medical would be helpful, because then, if it was like, it's these 2 machines and the variation of air should be 5%, as Alisha could probably attest to, then it would be very helpful, because every state, in Nevada, we require 4 tests. In California, there's 5. In Oregon, it might be 6. So that also doesn't help things, because now you have all these other weird variants of how the states want it tested. And we need some uniformity, I believe, on that.
Yeah. And Massachusetts, by the way, I'm pretty sure is like 18 or 20 different things they test for. They wanted
Oh,
they wanted to have the the most accurate testing in the country, so they wanted to stand out. So they did this, and I know a few of these scientists. And Alisha, you are right on. But how about some standards and practices for the industry that everybody can actually agree on? That's what I'd like to see. But unfortunately, we're up against the half hour. So I have to say goodbye to Alisha and to Susan. Thank you so much for joining us. We could talk forever.
Yep.
Brooke and I could talk forever too. We appreciate your time with us. Thank you. And we'll have more, the big last half hour of Green Rush Live after this. Don't go away. It's a whole new world of weed out there, isn't it? Everyone is learning new ways to titrate, ingest, consume, imbibe, and engage with this plant medicine we call cannabis. Hi, I'm Jimmy Young, the founder of Pro Cannabis Media and the host of In the Weeds, and once in a while, the really live business cannabis talk show we call Green Rush on Friday afternoons from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. Eastern. I've been a medical patient in Massachusetts for almost 10 years now. I remember my first trip to a dispensary just outside of Boston, and I told the bud tender I didn't want to smoke it anymore. So I tried edibles, then tinctures, then vaping, and now if I'm going to smoke, I only use the Weegets filtration system. What? The Weegets.com, Weegets, that's weed, W-E-E-D, G-E-T-S.com, is where you'll find the planet's coolest product.
Both cool the smoke from 1300 degrees to just 90 into your lungs. Plus, the maze pipe and pre-roll filters get rid of all the gunk that you just don't want in your lungs if you can help it.
Add in the code of PCMTV and you get 15% off. So just go to Weegets.com and check out the best way to enjoy a cooler smoke with less coughing and hacking and more peace of mind. All that resin and tar is collected in the polyurethane filters that are easy to clean with soap, water, and a few Q-tips. Your lungs will thank you, and so will I.
We are a cultivation through to consumption lifestyle brand for the cannabis industry. Of course, the crown jewel in our product line is the Armoire home grow system. So now with Green Goddess Supply, we can take you everywhere from growing it in the armoire right through to storing it, consuming it, rolling it, storing it, you name it, A to Z. Our goal is to enable everybody and anybody anywhere to be able to produce their own organic flower quickly, easily, discreetly, and inexpensively.
You would think that it is. However, there's quite a bit of debate right now in the accounting industry when it relates to cannabis with this exact question. I'm part of a few different networking groups that are solely accountants for cannabis companies. And there's been quite a bit of back and forth in those communities and discussion regarding whether 280E, if it went away, if the administration legalized cannabis or took it off of Schedule 1, what would happen? And it could go either way right now. The debate is it can make the accountant's life much easier. That's what a lot of the inexperienced accountants are saying right now, it seems, whereas the accountants that have been in this industry for a while and have gone through the same thing that happened with hemp a few years ago are saying that will make lives more difficult, because when hemp became declassified a while back, the accounting became more complicated.
And welcome back to the final 30 minutes of Green Rush Live. A reminder that at the top of the hour, this week's edition of Weed Talk News will be streamed right after this show. So if you're already watching this program, you can just leave it on and listen to the roundup that we do every week of state-to-state cannabis news. I'm Jimmy Young, the founder of Pro Cannabis Media, and I will admit, I anchored this week, and I was, well, let's just say I'm glad that Elena Pinto is coming back in a few weeks, because I still think she's 100 times better than I am, and everybody should watch that show because she's a network talent. So there you go. Brooke Westlake is with me and has been with me for the last hour and a half, and she is, of course, the woman behind the woman at Cannabis Expo. And Brooke, you've been great through this whole thing. And while we wait for our guests, we're supposed to have 2 more guests. And if they show, they show. If they don't, you and I can chit chat very easily for the next 20 odd minutes or so. What are you taking out of some of the answers and discussions that we've had with some of the people that we brought in? Okay, what are some of the little topics that you thought of? Well, that's really interesting.
I love that we've really had a diverse collective group of women today, from attorneys to doctors to HR to biochemists, and to hearing some of the barriers that have been broken down from topless dispensaries. I'd never heard of that before. I think the key takeaway that I'm getting is that there's still a lot of love and passion for women in this industry. There's a lot of women out there encouraging other women to come into the space, even though we still have a lot of red tape hurdles, such as the banking and advertising and lab testing that is inaccurate at times, or fudging numbers. And so what I'm gathering from all these women is not only are they continuing on the road of passion that they have for this plant, they're still excited to be here. They do see that we have a lot of work left to do, but that does not deter them. I think women, we are a force of nature to be reckoned with. The plant is female. Having women, we are great multitaskers, and we get a lot of things done. And so what I'm gathering from all these amazing leaders that we've spoken with is they're really not leaving one stone left unturned. They are handling things pretty much head on. I think it was great that one of our speakers was talking about women not knowing your worth, and that men collectively, like, they put down a number for what they want to get for earning and pay. And women will kind of like negotiate, oh, sure, I'll take a little less or whatnot. And knowing your worth, standing up and saying, like, I am valued. I have a master's degree. I have 20 years experience, and this is what I expect for this position. And I think more women doing that in this industry will be helpful. I also gathered collectively, and I had already kind of been feeling this way, that there was kind of like the lacking part of the professional, the business side that still needs to, it's happening in small ways. It happens with my expo for Women in Cannabis Expo. We are all about the education and professionalism. Like I said, I have a 20-year background from healthcare. And so those were my expectations when I came in, was that my shows are of that of business, professional, high level. And we're hearing that some of that is actually now starting to kind of have that trickle down effect on other events and companies, with them talking about saying it needs to have more of that business acumen. And I think that's a critical element. We also touched on the national part of national, making cannabis national is not going to make all the issues go away, but it can make some things easier, such as the banking issues that we have. I also think advertising, that would also make advertising a little bit easier. As you know, you can't advertise on Facebook, anything cannabis related. How are those people garnishing their clients? And I talk a lot about this, is really the advertising is based on either you're doing promos on billboards. If you live in a place that will do billboards, even then it's regulated. You can't have a billboard next to a school, so to speak, which makes sense. I get that. But we can't advertise traditionally on TV. We can't advertise traditionally on radio. So us collectively as a group of individuals, males and females, moving forward, is that we're pushing out our message on shows like with Jimmy and I having discussions on normalization of cannabis for medical and recreational use. And I'm actually gathering a lot from these women today. I'm so glad. Some of them I've not met in person, and I am super eager to have them at one of my trade shows. And some of them I have had on at my trade shows, and I'm eager to have them back. So that's kind of, I've gotten a big picture takeaway. What about you?
Yeah, similar stuff. There are certain things and certain buzzwords that I think you've already picked up on that I cringe when I hear it. I cringe when I hear the word marijuana. Okay.
Yes.
You know, I
Same.
really do. You can make a distinction. The cannabis sativa plant has THC in it. Hemp has
Yep.
0.3% THC in it. Those are two different words, two different things, but they are actually from the same plant. And you can ask the scientist all about that, because genetics, you know, I didn't know that genetics was seeds before I started interviewing different growers and what have you. So, I've learned quite a bit about the industry too. And I'm fascinated with the fact that they can actually, and you heard the chief science officer, is that Alisha?
I think, that was Alisha.
And you heard her talking about tissue, right? I can't believe that they can actually manipulate the DNA of a seed. It's just bizarre to me. The science goes way above my mental grade for sure. And I'm not afraid to admit that for sure. But that's one thing. I thought it was also interesting about the testing thing, because, at some point we're going to need to have standards and practices inside the industry. And I don't know if our federal government or, any federal government, let's not just say the United States federal government, any federal, has the knowledge that some of these chief scientific officers have, that some of the growers have, that and business people are business people. I certainly have learned that. But this is a completely unique industry and a unique plant, because it's been used for thousands of years. It was vilified because the almighty dollar back in the 1920s and 30s wanted to make sure that the post-world, I think this was the antebellum South, Jim Crow South. They wanted to make sure it kept going. So they put Harry Anslinger in charge of the first narcotics bureau, and he was blatant racist, for crying out loud. And that was just the first one in. Every single time the federal government has done any kind of organized research study on this plant, they usually come back with the old, well, we couldn't really find anything. The substance abuse community has created cannabis use disorder. And I get it. Too much of anything is a bad thing. So now, of course, our substance abuse community is out there basically saying, we need to make sure that we take care of this. It's about education. The only way we learned that drinking and driving was bad was because of Mothers Against Drunk Driving. That did not come up in that era. You came up in the DARE era, which was the next one. That was the Ronnie Reagan, Nancy Reagan era. But we learned through education. And because this plant really hasn't been, the potency of the new strains haven't really been tested and researched that much. So there's so much to learn still about this plant that has been used for thousands of years as a medicine. And I've said this many, many times. The word recreational bothers me, because I had a cough a week ago and I was using Robitussin and Mucinex. Okay, dextromethorphan. I think people know what that is. That gets you high, people. Okay, and now you have to show an ID, adult 21, to walk out of CVS, Walgreens, or any other supermarket that has it, to prove that you're an adult and you know how to responsibly use it.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we preach. Responsible use. Learn about it. I remember getting my medical card in 2013, and I must have spent hours on leafly.com. And then I found greenflower.com, and I'll give them both plugs because I learned so much more from those two entities. And by the way, both on the West Coast. Okay. So they were obviously ahead of the curve to the East Coast, because Massachusetts was the first East Coast adult use legalization in the country. So, there's still plenty of issues, so many different aspects of this industry. And I think that women have a great opportunity to find their way in it. Brooke, can I ask you about science? Did you study science in school at all?
So, yes, part of there's a two-part answer to that is yes, I was a biology major originally when I went into college. and I transitioned over to criminal justice, both of which are collectively surrounding the plant. As you know, with the science part, like Alisha talking about breaking down the seed and having it broken down in different ways. What deterred me from the healthcare field was I was a surgical tech, and I saw a lot of things in the operating room that doctors did that I did not agree with. I then ended up I was in public sector of healthcare, and I went into private, where I did get to make a difference for people's lives with telehealth kiosks, new to market, new product development. And then I shifted when I went and did my master's degree in criminal justice, is then when I shifted into cannabis, because my mentor said to me, your medical background with criminal justice, you should open a testing lab. And I was like, what are you talking about? I know nothing about testing. And he said, you would be phenomenal at it. And he's right. I would be phenomenal at it. The hurdles that I've been up against have been that the state, after 2019, I'm in Nevada, they got sued for how they did the licensing, and they still have not opened up licensing for cannabis testing labs. Cannabis testing labs cost roughly $2 to $3 million to open, and that is 2 years of revenue. That is to cover you're not even pulling in profit. So if I still wanted to have a license, I could buy somebody else's license, but they're going to charge me $1 million for it. Why am I going to pay another $1 million when I'm already doing $2 to $3 million in debt? But now, guess what? We have Kristen with us, and she can talk about some of these amazing things, because she can share. She's in Nevada, hoping that they're one of our sponsors this year for Women in Cannabis Expo, but she can specifically talk on, and I want her to introduce herself and share what Greater Nevada Credit Union has done and is doing for women and cannabis businesses in Nevada. Hi, Kristen, welcome.
Hi there, Brooke. Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
I love credit unions. I'm in a credit union, just for the record.
I love that. Thank you.
Not in the Nevada Credit Union, but you know what? I'm not even in one in Massachusetts. That's another story. So tell us a little bit about the Greater Nevada Credit Union, and how many cannabis companies do you bank there?
So I can't tell you exact numbers, but I can tell you that we have
Over 4.
Over 4, yes, definitely over 4, and add some extra digits to that, and we're in that area.
There you go. There you go.
So Greater Nevada Credit Union, I've been with the organization since September, and prior to that, I was with another organization starting a cannabis banking program in Southern Nevada for them. So I've been in the cannabis banking space for quite some time now. And one of the things that I really love about what Greater Nevada is doing in this space is truly wanting to serve the operators and their employees where they're at, not expecting them to be a certain profitability, not expecting them to have a certain revenue, not expecting them to have certain board of director individuals that look a certain way or things like that. So we're meeting our operators in their space where they need it, and we're providing a full suite of federally compliant bank services. So not just a bank account and a savings account. They can authorize ACH transactions. They can authorize wire transfers. They can, so like paying your taxes to the IRS via wire. Hello, that's amazing. Right. Online banking services, so you can do transfers between your different accounts, so that if you need your dispensary account to get a transfer from your operations account, we can do that. We also offer a debit card, which is a little bit of a controversial item in some programs. Not every program has decided to offer that for the operators due to some risk mitigation policies that their boards have put together. But here at Greater Nevada, we decided that we wanted to offer that to add that convenience and mitigate the risk on the inside for us. So that way, a dispensary operator can go and buy a ream of paper, or they can buy their team lunch on a holiday and use a debit card for convenience. And then one of the other things that I absolutely love that we're doing in this space is we recognize that there was a lot of red tape for the employees. Once they got their cannabis income, they were kind of strapped on what they could do as far as walking into one of the big banks and being able to get a mortgage or being able to get a car loan, because they wouldn't count their cannabis income. So Greater Nevada said, not here. We're going to count all of your income, and we will use that toward the qualifications of your loans and credit cards and mortgages, and we'll offer direct deposit. And we know what you do. We love what you do, and we want to help you do more of it.
I absolutely love that. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm so glad you guys are here in my state and love working with you guys. Thank you so much for that. Kiko, thank you for joining us.
Hi, Kiko.
We're
Hello,
so happy.
hello, Brooke. So
Hi.
nice to see you. It's been way too long, but
That's
lovely to
right.
be
I
here.
agree. Absolutely. And you've been
I
busy.
know.
Go ahead, Brooke.
Tico,
Talk to Tico. Go ahead.
tell our audience all about you, what you do, because you're amazing. Your background is phenomenal in the cannabis industry. And we love working with you. And Jimmy goes, oh my gosh, Tico's coming on tonight. And I said, yes, she is. So fill in all of our viewers. We were just having a nice discussion with Kristen. So tell us, everybody, what you do. And thank you for always being a supporter of Women in Cannabis Expo.
Yeah.
Well, Kristen, I just think it's wonderful what you've developed there in Nevada. I mean, you can't even imagine what we used to do. I've been in the industry for a while, but I've been in the community much, much longer. My background's Ayurvedic Chinese holistic medicine, and I've been working with patients for many, many years. And the most important thing to me is knowing that something is paving the way for patients to have more access. So having Pro Cannabis Media is definitely getting the word and the education out there and having wonderful activists on the line, because Brooke, I think you are an activist sharing the good word and making a difference. So my main goal was just being part of the community for many years. I never thought that it could be a company, it could be a business, and it was definitely a slow growth, and it's been an amazing journey, and I'm very honored to be here. And now it was back in 2015 when I met a gentleman. I helped his friend alleviate their prostate cancer, and he just happened to have a resort in Jamaica, and that the laws that were moving forward to have legal cannabis access were coming about. And he said, I'd really like to have at my resort education on cannabis for wellness. And I wrote up something, I emailed it to him, and the very next day he said, let's do this. And that's what we've been doing. And now our CEO is Dr. Adam Abdili, who is a cannabis physician and surgeon. And he's been wonderful. And we have a whole team of people that we've slowly been developing. And now we can welcome guests or kayaking, snorkeling, yoga, meditation. And we are doing fungi ceremonies because that is legal in Jamaica. And we have our own licensed dispensary. And here in the States, I'm still based in Southern California. So I'm definitely still part of the community and just so blessed to be here, truly.
And
Thank
we're
you.
blessed, and we're blessed to have you, by the way. And thank you for that plug. I really do appreciate that. But we have to talk about the Coral Cove Wellness Retreat. I mean, not only that, but I know that you're offering trips to people for promotional purposes too now, aren't you?
Well, Jimmy, do you need a trip to Jamaica?
I may never come back if I go to Jamaica, let's just say.
We definitely, one of my wonderful parts of the job is my community outreach. And so, yes, I do give trips to different organizations and to be able to support them. And I know Brooke has been a recipient of that for her Women in Cannabis. And it's just been a joy to be able to share that with people.
I love that. You know, Coral Cove Wellness, and actually this question is for both of you and Kristen. So you mentioned the psychedelics, the psilocybin that has come online in Jamaica. And I absolutely love that. I have not been out to Coral Cove yet, but we thank you graciously for your donations that you've given to our organizations and our winners. When did psilocybin come online for you? And then the second part of this question then goes to Kristen. Kristen, you guys are doing such a phenomenal job with cannabis. Are you guys also talking about when this comes on the ballot in Nevada for psilocybin? Are you guys going to have the same kind of love and offerings that you're giving for the cannabis business owners? So it's kind of like a two-part question. We'll start with Tico and then we'll go over to Kristen.
I would have to say I was very fungi curious. And when Ram Dass, who was Dr. Richard Alpert, he was a professor at Harvard with Timothy Leary. when he got kicked out of Harvard along with Timothy Leary. The very first time he taught back at a major university, I became one of his students. And that was back in the late 70s. So I have been definitely studying fungi medicine for decades. And I thought for many years it would have to be a secret I could never tell people who knew me. But now it's definitely come to fruition where I can tell everybody about my experiences. And I would have to say, I did share with you, I had lost 85 pounds, and I did that through microdosing. And I'm planning on writing a book about that. Where we're at now with fungi medicine is we've assisted many people for PTSD, anxiety, sexual trauma, depression, and we have a couple of groups that are coming in to do research and clinical trials on alcoholism and alleviating themselves from those other types of addictions. So it is something that's a slow growth because it's just like cannabis. We need to be able to educate people about the safety and the understanding of a natural plant-based and fungi medicine within the human body. So we need to start there. And yes, I do want to know about if the financial community will be able to support that expansion.
That is a great question. And it is something that we've actually been discussing very preliminarily. And what it comes down to really is there a framework that's going to be out there for us to be able to follow to make sure that we're being compliant? And it's not necessarily whether or not we support or don't support the line of business or whether we're, psilocybin pro or not. It comes down to the framework that the government puts out for us. And if there are rules that they put out there that we can follow, we will follow them and we will support that line of business. But you'll see that there's been a little bit of hesitation in the industry, even some not wanting to support hemp and CBD, because hemp and CBD don't have the same set of rules and guidelines and regulations that are set forth that cannabis does. So we get to play a game with cannabis where we know all the rules. And some people are like, I don't want to play the same game with CBD and hemp because I don't know the rules. And nobody wants to play a game with the government where you don't know the rules. So as long as those are put out there, I think there's definitely a way forward for the forward-thinking financial institutions like Greater Nevada to support that line of business once it comes on, but it will be slow. And credit unions traditionally are pretty conservative. So I don't think it'll be something that happens immediately, but when it does happen, it will be credit unions that do it.
Yes, let those credit unions live and let them lead the way in our banking, for crying out loud. Anyway, so Brooke, you got one more? Because I could always pick up a question here, but we're up against the clock too a little bit.
Yeah, we're up against the clock. So I was going to say, leave us some words of inspiration for women in this industry. Kiko, you have been phenomenal with your background. Kristen, I love that you've came on board with Greater Nevada Credit Union. I can't wait to do more work with you guys. Leave these women that have been watching the show and people who want to go into cannabis, leave them a word of wisdom, and then that's it. We're at the hour.
I would say that this community and industry is open for anybody who has that desire. We welcome women. We need new women. We need everyone to be able to understand the benefits of natural plant-based medicine. So I welcome you. Reach out to me. And I look forward to speaking to you soon.
Awesome.
I would say, make sure that you're confident in your voice. Women have so much knowledge, so much power, so much to offer in this space. And when you start second guessing yourself, you do yourself a disservice. So be confident in your voice, be confident in your knowledge, make a seat for yourself at the table, make them listen.
Amen. Amen to that, because
that is
Alisha, wasn't that
perfect
kind of a running theme today? Is
yes,
the power
it was.
of the voice.
Brooke, I'm going to let you give tell us what you're going to take away from the last 2 hours. Go ahead.
Yes,
my takeaway is this. I want to thank all the women that have continued to support me and women in cannabis and had embraced me because I came from a medical background, and everybody that I have met along the way in this journey has fully embraced me and my company and support my vision. And I want to continue to encourage women to join us. Jimmy and I will host again the fourth Friday of every month. Our next show is going to be set for July the 28th, 1 p.m. Pacific Standard, 4 p.m. Eastern Time. Women who have joined us today, you two beautiful women, if you have recommendations for women that we should have on the show with us, please let us know. But yes, that is the takeaway. Thank you for all of the support and embracing me in the community. And Kiko, we love you. And Kristen, I'm so
Love
excited.
you.
Hey, it's
Your
all
next show, let's give
plan.
away a trip to Coral Cove.
You know what? I'll follow up with you. We have some we are going to be going to market with some fun things, so I'm going to reach out to you, and I so appreciate that. But for now, I got to wrap it up because the news is on at 6 o'clock every Friday here on Pro Cannabis Media, on our Roku channel, our Apple channel, Android, and of course, when we go really live, like we are now, it's on all the social media platforms that Pro Cannabis Media has a page on. So I want to thank everybody from PCM, Dan French, and others. And I appreciate everybody taking the time out to watch. Remember, it's a whole new world of weed out there, people. Use it responsibly. Take care. Have a good weekend, and we'll see you in a few weeks.
Coming up on We Talk News this week, in Washington, D.C., Republicans and Democrats agree on a resolution that Russia should release 3 Americans now behind bars. That includes former teacher Mark Fogel, who is in prison there since 2021 on a cannabis possession charge. Meanwhile, in Colombia, the legalization movement has been halted after the Senate couldn't get enough votes to pass that proposed constitutional amendment. And the NCAA will decide in the fall if they will take cannabis off drug testing requirements for its collegiate athletes, after a key competition and medical committee deemed the plant medicine is not performance enhancing. And Jim Belushi for Senate? The Oregon grower, actor, and advocate is asking his followers on social media if he should enter politics. He would have our vote for sure. All that and state by state cannabis news on We Talk News next.
We are Pro Cannabis Media.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to We Talk News for this week. I'm the founder of Pro Cannabis Media, Jimmy Young, filling in for Elena Pinto, who is off on vacation and will be back on July 14th. Now, one of the most powerful organizations in this country is the NCAA. They govern athletics amongst all of their member schools, universities, and colleges in this nation. Now, a panel on the competitive safeguards and medical aspects of sports has concluded that testing should be limited to performance-enhancing drugs. Furthermore, they conclude that cannabis is not in this category. So that Competition and Medical Aspects Committee is recommending to remove cannabis from drug testing for the entire NCAA. Now, that whole organization will need to approve this before it is enacted, and that vote won't happen until this fall. Checking on federal reform in the Washington, D.C. area on a regular basis is our own reporter in D.C., Andrew Berenger.
Hello, this is Andrew Berenger reporting from Washington, D.C. for We Talk News. In federal news, updates regarding recent developments in the Biden administration's stance on cannabis policy and scheduling. Advocates are pushing for a more comprehensive solution, the descheduling of cannabis altogether. Over 80 organizations have come together urging the Biden administration to end the federal prohibition of cannabis and support comprehensive reform. Now, previously on October 6, 2022, an announcement was made from the Biden administration signaling a significant shift in the approach to federal cannabis possession cases. The administration decided to pardon simple federal cannabis possession cases for certain individuals, urging and hopeful that state governors would follow suit and also consider pardoning cannabis cases. Now, these developments underscore the ongoing discussion and debates surrounding cannabis policy in our country. The Biden administration's actions to reassess and reevaluate the current regulatory framework amplifies the growing momentum for comprehensive reform in the United States. Also, in a rare showing of bipartisan support for anything, The U.S. House of Representatives recently unanimously approved a resolution expressing support for Americans incarcerated in Russia, including a U.S. citizen serving a 14-year sentence for possessing medical cannabis legally obtained in Pennsylvania. This measure, introduced by Representative Michael McCall of Texas, received overwhelming support, passing with a vote of 422 to 0. Officials highlighted the case of this individual, stating that his charges parallel those faced by Brittany Griner, an American basketball player imprisoned in Russia recently due to possession of vape cartridges containing cannabis oil. Now, finally, an exciting news awaits as we gear up for a significant milestone in Maryland's cannabis market. Now, I don't know if you remember, but starting July 1st, adult use cannabis will be legal for individuals aged 21 and above. So what does that mean? Well, with a valid government ID, such as driver's license, passport, or military ID, you will have the legal right to purchase and possess cannabis products from registered dispensaries across the state. Also, for those with a green thumb, you'll be pleased to know that starting July 1st, each person can grow up to 2 cannabis plants with a maximum of 4 cannabis plants permitted per household. And those interested in entering the industry, mark your calendars. In September of this year, applications for new licenses will open, providing an opportunity to contribute to Maryland's thriving cannabis market. Get ready, Maryland. Starting July 1st, cannabis is legal. Well, that will do it for me in the DC area report for this week. And once again, I am Andrew Behringer reporting for We Talk News.
Out west in California, that state continues to struggle with the battle between legacy and legal markets. Overregulation, high taxes, and lack of banking continues to wreak havoc in the nation's #1 cannabis market. A major distributor, Herbal, is now in receivership. Lavana Vasa has our California cannabis report for this week.
I'm Lavana Vasa, and this is what's happening in the California cannabis industry right now. On June 20th, the California Department of Cannabis Control announced allocating almost $4 million in funding to 18 new local jurisdictions to expand access to licensed cannabis retail in a first-of-its-kind program. But the question is, will this make a difference in the struggling California cannabis industry that is facing what some have called a mass extinction event? Last year, 2 of the biggest national cannabis brands, Massachusetts-based Curaleaf and Florida-based Trulieve, closed up shop on their California operations, indicating an overregulated, overtaxed, and climate change-stressed California cannabis market. And now it's apparent that another major player in the California industry has died off. Although officially unconfirmed by anyone directly from the company, it looks like one of the biggest California distributors, Herbal, is failing. In the past week or so, several former employees have been saying farewell to the company on LinkedIn, and several publications have pontificated on the company officially going under. Then yesterday, the North Bay Business Journal reported in an article on their website that, quote, a sign dated June 15th on the Coffee Park front gate at 3158 Condo Court reads, notice to pay rent or surrender possession of the premises. It continues with the request from Siri Property Management Santa Rosa for back rent totaling more than $20,400. And that the cannabis company that raked in $700 million in sales in 2022, according to MarketWatch, has until Thursday to respond or face a formal eviction. The article also reported that the building was locked up and appeared to be closed for business. In other news, the Bay Area continues to be plagued by dispensary robberies. On Tuesday, SFS reported 3 robberies of cannabis dispensaries and businesses occurred in one night in Oakland. In one of the incidences, the thieves used a forklift to ram their way into the dispensary and rob it. The reason why thieves have been targeting dispensaries is because there is still no federal legalization, and therefore most banks won't do business with cannabis businesses, forcing them to hold large amounts of cash. The Safe Banking Act has been slowly making its way through legislation, and if passed, would hopefully solve this devastating issue. This has been the California Cannabis Industry Update. I'm Lavana Vastov, reporting for Pro Cannabis Media.
Right next to California is Nevada, and that state continues to be one of the most cannabis friendly, with some hotels embracing the culture already. And now the governor there has changed some of the laws to make them even more friendly to the consumer. Governor Joe Lombardo approved laws to increase the limit on purchases and possession to 2.5 ounces and concentrates double from an eighth to a quarter of an ounce. The law also allows the existing adult use licensees to sell to medical patients as well. Las Vegas and Clark County will have social consumption lounges first, and they could be operational by this fall. Consumption is not a problem in the state of Missouri, where they continue to set sales records for a new market. Brandon Jones has our Missouri report, sponsored by Baker Brands.
What's up, everybody? It's Brandon Jones with B Green Distribution with Missouri Cannabis Report for Weed Talk News. And that's right, consumption, not an issue here in Missouri. Neither are sales. Yeah, we're having some consumption lounges actually starting to pop up all over the city here. They sometimes are going to be there for long term, and we're seeing a lot of little pop-up consumption events happening all over the city. The biggest one that I couldn't believe actually happened was Boulevardia. So Boulevardia was put on by Boulevard, our biggest craft brewery company here in the Kansas City area. They have a national distribution, and one of the VIP sponsors was a cannabis company. So downtown Kansas City, Mayor Quentin Lucas playing the tambourine, dancing around with the music, having smoke on one side and a VIP trailer for cannabis at the biggest craft beer event in Kansas City. It was pretty crazy. So we are really starting to see cannabis get involved and intertangled in all of the mainstream events here in Kansas City now, as long as we're on the Missouri side. Please stay away from the Kansas side, as I had to go on this last week from downtown Kansas City to Kansas City, Kansas to watch my buddy, Mr. Mac Mo Green fight in an MMA fight. And I had to make sure that I had a buddy meet me somewhere to make sure all of my stuff did not travel across the state line, if you know what I mean. Kansas is still crazy, so have to be careful if you're having events, even if they're in the same city. Sometimes you're crossing a state line and you could be breaking the law. So be careful here in Kansas City when you're jumping from event to event. Make sure you're still in Missouri. Other than that, consumption is great. In Kansas, no. Be careful. So yes, events are going great. Cannabis is great in the state of Missouri, and sales are going awesome. So we're just really excited to be here. Come down, check out all the events. There's going to be many more. I know on July 8th, Dab Stars is having one, and then obviously 7/10. We know there's going to be tons of events for Concentrate Day. So I'm Brandon Jones with B Green Distribution for the Missouri Cannabis Report for We Talk News. Stay educated and medicated. Have a great week.
Brandon Jones, Missouri Cannabis Report is brought to you by Baker Brands, a curated B2B marketplace for head shops and dispensaries.
In Vermont, Jesse Lynn Dolan is off this week, but there was a significant part of the bill that Jesse Lynn told us about last week that we want to continue to talk about. So this Vermont Cannabis Report is sponsored by Canatrol, the best drying and curing process in the industry. Governor Phil Scott let some significant changes become law last week without his signature. He allowed that the state to open up its own independent testing lab that will now be allowed to do random testing of products to ensure their quality and cannabinoid makeup. He also increased the amount of THC allowed to be grown in products from 50 milligrams of THC to 100. And he increased the amount of plants people can grow at home in Vermont from 9 to 12. Now, one other thing in that new bill is that a propagation license is available now that will allow growers the opportunity to sell clones to other licensees. So it's not just about seeds anymore. That's the abridged Vermont Cannabis Report, sponsored by Canatrol.
The Vermont Cannabis Report is supported by another Green Mountain business, Canatrol, winner of High Times Best Dry Cure System. Check them out at canatrols.com.
Louisiana Governor John Bel Edwards has signed a new bill into law that eases state penalties for possession and expungement. First-time offenders of cannabis possessions will have 90 days to get their records expunged. That's down from 5 years. Court costs have also been capped at $300. Now, in that state, it's progress, and the law passed with a bipartisan vote. Out in Arizona, expungement is always an important part of any new law, and the Grand Canyon State has a vibrant market since its inception. Now it looks like they're going to continue to do the right thing, and here's Karen Black with her Arizona Cannabis Report.
I'm Karen Black with Green Finger Consulting. Welcome to the Arizona Cannabis Report for Weed Talk News. Several Arizona marijuana products, 2 from True Infusion and 4 from Cannabis, have been voluntarily recalled this month due to possible contamination by Aspergillus and Salmonella. Auditors for the Arizona Department of Health Services found what they are calling potential false results reported by a licensed testing laboratory. The manufacturers worked with the state agency and retailers to remove the products from shelves out of caution. There have been no reports of associated illness to date. More information can be found on the Arizona Department of Health Services website. There's been a lot of buzz these past couple weeks about a 2-year-old cannabis cultivation facility based at what was once North America's largest underground copper mine in San Manuel, Arizona, a small town northeast of Tucson. The 100,000 square foot facility, dubbed the Flower Mine, is owned and operated by Phoenix-based MSO, the Flower Shop, and produces 31,000 pounds of flower annually. The company has been lauded for bringing jobs back to the community, for drilling its own wells, and for using a new technology to capture and reuse 75% of its water, which is always an issue in the desert. Phoenix-based Tilt Holdings recently announced that D'Angela Diaz-Sims stepped down from its board of directors to focus on her own business. Her seat was filled by Arthur Art Smuck, a supply chain expert who previously served as COO of Herbal and CEO of FedEx Supply Chain. As for new and noteworthy products now available in Arizona, Payson-based Ally Biotech recently debuted Chill Pills with a Z, which are THC and THC plus CBD soft gels to give consumers an alternate method of consumption. The line includes sativa, indica, and hybrid products sold as day caps, night caps, and anytime caps. California-based 22 Red recently launched 4 new strains in Arizona: Cherry on Top, Grape Stomper, Hippie Crasher, and Papaya Punch. They and other 22 Red products are available at over 20 locations in the state. Here are some upcoming cannabis social events around Arizona. The Lions Den Bar and Grill in the Pinetop Lakeside area is hosting its 2nd annual Weekend in the Pines, featuring live music and designated smoking areas the evenings of June 23rd and 24th. Elevated Wellness's monthly BYOC yoga class is June 23rd in Cave Creek, Arizona. Trap Culture's June Trap Night, a monthly cannabis-friendly nightclub event, is on June 24th at the Soho Lounge in Mesa. And Hempful Farms is hosting a 3-hour puff and paint session July 8th. 2 upcoming cannabis business events are the Drops with a Z and Meta monthly networking meetings. Drops is June 23rd in Tucson, and Meta is June 28th in Scottsdale. That will do it for this week's Arizona Cannabis Report. I'm Karen Black from Green Finger Consulting, reporting for Weed Talk News.
In the Keystone State of Pennsylvania, there's a movement to improve their hemp market, while rezoning could put existing medical dispensaries in danger of losing out on a future adult use market. Here's Claudia Post with the Pennsylvania Cannabis Report.
I'm Claudia Post from Scarlet Express, and I'm here in the Keystone State, Pennsylvania, reporting for Weed Talk News. If new zoning rules proposed by Philadelphia City Councilman Brian O'Neill are approved in the coming months, several medical marijuana dispensaries across Northeast Philadelphia will be cut out of the future recreational market. Unbelievable what they're doing. It's a terrible business. Councilman O'Neill introduced a bill to amend 2 zoning overlay districts to prohibit the sale of recreational marijuana. There are already 3 medical marijuana dispensaries operating in the area. A 3rd zoning overlay in Philadelphia, says Councilman Curtis Jones, along City Line Avenue was included in the proposed ban. This legislation is disappointing because legal medical marijuana operators spent millions on building their dispensaries and investing in heightened security measures. Businesses have already signed leases, some of upwards to 10 years with landlords. And of course, I have to make a comment about every state, including working heavily in New Jersey. This is what they're doing. They're making it so onerous and so difficult for us to stand up in the industry. And I don't understand why, because there's money for everyone, employment for everyone. Anyway, enough of my rant for today. Pennsylvania's Agriculture Secretary announced on Thursday that the state will be distributing nearly $400,000 in matched funding to promote the hemp market, including by creating a curriculum to teach high school and college students about the many uses of the cannabis plant. And I think I've said before that Pennsylvania, way back in the 1700s, was the largest producer of hemp. The bulk of grant funds will support the student initiative, with money being used to create a STEM, that's science, technology, engineering, and math curriculum, to effectively engage in industrial hemp production, management, and cultivation by producing and promoting and marketing industrial hemp for its many uses, such as food, fiber, fuel, industrial, and personal care products. The Pennsylvania Departments of Agriculture and Education previously announced in 2020 that K through 12 students will be learning about how to make sustainable plastic using hemp. One of the grants will go towards the U.S. Ecological Advanced Research and Conservation Hub Hemp Certificate for disadvantaged communities. It is called on to develop an educational program for disadvantaged communities, including youth, veterans, and women, to enable them to get involved in the hemp industry. Pennsylvania has been making history building a new hemp industry from its roots up, said Russell Redding, the Agriculture Secretary. These grants feed the growth of an industry that once a staple in Pennsylvania economy and now is once again growing opportunities for new businesses, farm income jobs, and climate-smart, environmentally sound products. Pennsylvania has been making history building a new hemp industry from its roots up. These grants feed the growth of an industry, as I said, which was once a staple of Pennsylvania's economy and is once again growing opportunities for businesses, farms, jobs, and climate-smart, environmentally sound products. Well, that's a wrap from Pennsylvania. I'm Claudia Post from Scarlet Express to talk about what's hot and what's not in Pennsylvania from We Talk News. Have a fabulous week, and thank you.
Over the past year, legalization of adult use and sale of cannabis in the South American country of Colombia has gained quite a bit of momentum. So much so that a vote was taken in their Senate this week that got a majority of votes to pass a legalization bill. Now, unfortunately, according to Colombian law and a constitution, you have to have a super majority for a constitutional amendment to be added, that is, and a bill of this magnitude that includes that constitutional amendment has to happen. So it failed to pass by 8 votes. Well, now that whole process has to start all over again in Colombia. You don't think that the drug cartels in that country might be trying to keep things just the way they are? Just thinking. Anyway, now let's turn to our international scene with our European correspondent, Lex Pelger.
Hello, everyone. I'm Lex Pelger from Whitewell Creation with this week's European Cannabis Report for Weed Talk News. In Europe this week, everybody is waiting on Germany, because being the largest economy in Europe means that everybody pays attention to you. For instance, in the Czech Republic, the health minister Vlastimil Velik has cast doubts on the country's ambitious plans to roll out an adult-use cannabis market by 2024. He said that he's waiting for Germany to reveal the draft of their adult-use cannabis laws and to see how the European Commission responds to that proposal. In contrast, the Czech Republic's anti-drug coordinator Jindřich Voboril, sometimes called the locomotive driving the reform, wants to push ahead with the country's new cannabis laws. The proposed regulations would include a paid license for the cannabis market that is reasonably priced, the ability of pharmacies to sell cannabis without paying a fee, and for citizens to cultivate up to 3 square meters for personal use. Voboril has said that he is not deterred by Germany's scaled-back plan or the threat of European Commission pushback because he doesn't think they'll do anything. Another watcher of Germany is her small neighbor Luxembourg. The country initially planned to have a chain of 14 state-run dispensaries, but after the EU told Germany that if they did something similar, it wouldn't conform to EU law, Luxembourg decided to change its plans. The hope now is that the government will at least pass plans for self-cultivation and private consumption before elections in October. Finally, here in France, 2 pieces of news. First, the country instituted a ban on HHC, hexahydrocannabinol, as well as 2 sister molecules, HHCO and HHCP. With structures and effects similar to THC, products containing these psychoactive cannabinoids have been popular at CBD shops. Too popular. So the country's health minister decided to join a number of other EU countries to ban them in the name of fighting addiction. Meanwhile, on the other side of the spectrum, the town of Bègle, located just on the other side of the city here in Bordeaux, the mayor sent a letter to President Macron proposing to make his town a testing ground for the supervised sale of cannabis. Mayor Clément Razugnol-Puech says he is motivated by several objectives, including the reduction of trafficking and its associated violence, relieving congestion in the judicial system, curbing consumption by young people, and the economic contributions to the agricultural sector. With Bègle being the first town to ever marry a gay couple, this cannabis proposal keeps them at the forefront of French progressive movements. That's the European Cannabis Report for this week. For more on the science side, see my newsletter on Substack, Cannabinoids and the People. I'm Lex Pelger from Whitewell Creations reporting for Weed Talk News.
A vicious editorial in the New York Post ripped that state's embarrassing rollout of the legal adult use market. Now, I recognize that there's a big difference between an opinion piece in the Post and the New York Times, but the Post view that the state's rollout effort has, quote, gone up in smoke. It's pretty accurate, don't you think? The promises from state politicians that this new industry can produce billions of tax revenue has been a failure on many fronts and for many reasons. Pam Schmiel is our New York correspondent, and she has our weekly cannabis report from the Big Apple.
I'm Pam Schmiel, host of the Mary Jane Society podcast with the New York Cannabis Report for Weed Talk News. New York Governor Hochul held a press conference yesterday to announce increased enforcement to shut down hundreds of unlicensed cannabis shops in New York City. She's threatening to fine the stores up to $20,000 a day in some cases, and she's going after the landlords too. And as cannabis farmers, manufacturers, and dispensary owners in New York try to navigate the painfully slow rollout of the cannabis industry, they are moving full steam ahead with their business plans. They all gathered at an old factory in a small town in upstate New York yesterday for a new trade show called the Revelry Buyers Club. It was founded by 2 people who have been organizing cannabis meetups in New York City since 2016. The event brought together New York farmers, brands, and dispensary owners to meet each other and to do business together, where farmers showed off their craft cannabis flower, manufacturers flaunted their handcrafted gummies, and extractors elaborated on their terpene formulations. The industry's success depends on these people coming together to supply cannabis to the general public. And I can report that I witnessed grit and hustle at this event. These entrepreneurs are using blood, sweat, and tears to get the cannabis industry off the ground, and they could use help from our state government. That's this week's New York City Cannabis Report. I'm Pam Schmiel, reporting for Weed Talk News.
Delaware may be one of the smallest states in the union, but they are also starting their legal adult use market now. Needless to say, it takes time to set up all the regulations and compliance requirements. So this week, that state named a former law enforcement superintendent to head up the regulatory board. His name is Robert Koop, and for 27 years, he worked for the Delaware State Police and then moved on to Corrections and Homeland Security. Now, his nomination passed unanimously in that state's Senate. Now it's time to check the stock market with Doug Miller, who is high on Wall Street.
I'm Doug Miller from High on Wall Street with this week's cannabis stock report for Weed Talk News. TerrAscend won conditional approval to be listed on the Toronto Stock Exchange, the TSX. This is the first for a company with plant-touching operations in the U.S., where marijuana remains federally illegal. The TSX still must give the company final approval, but if the exchange does sign off, it could open the doors for other MSOs to tap into a larger pool of investors on the TSX. TerrAscend was trading around $1.70, and the stock chart's starting to look good. I would watch for dips, but I'm expecting it to start moving soon. And that's this week's cannabis stock report. Reporting for Weed Talk News, I'm Doug Miller.
Now that Fine Fettle in Newington became the first adult use dispensary in Connecticut to open, there will be many more to follow. And the Nutmeg State in Connecticut, that's what they call it, of course, they can now start to collect those valuable tax dollars. Angie Seifert is our correspondent down there, and here's this week's Connecticut Cannabis Report.
Hi, I'm Angie from Skip Intro Advisors with the Connecticut Cannabis Report for Weed Talk News. New Haven's first cannabis dispensary and retailer, Affinity Dispensary, is looking to move to a new location to replace a long-standing diner of 36 years near I-91, which will total almost 5,000 square feet with both medical and adult use. Recently, Massachusetts-based company INSA signed a 10-year lease to be the city's second cannabis operator and will convert the former site of Long Island Wharf Theater into a dispensary. Now, Trulieve earlier expressed interest in New Haven, but later withdrew the application to focus their efforts on the South. These expansions are supporting the idea that demand for the product and the experience is on a positive path in Connecticut, and dispensaries here are seeking to impress and retain consumers. Now, secondly, Stamford, Connecticut has collected almost $77,500 in tax revenue so far from its two hybrid cannabis retailers. Now, Connecticut started selling in January. So the money will be used to support projects to absorb the flooding in Stamford's downtown residential area. Now, state law requires that municipalities put their cannabis sales tax revenue towards streetscape improvements, yes. Now, also education or youth employment programs, juvenile review boards, mental health, addiction services, and services for people released from prison. In the city's budget, officials project that Stamford will collect $500,000 in tax revenue during the fiscal year 23 to 24. So while Stamford is only operating 2 dispensaries currently, the projection for tax revenue is within reach and could also benefit the people in addition to the landscape in the town. Now that's Connecticut Cannabis News Report for this week. I'm Angie Seifert from Skip Intro Advisors reporting for Weed Talk News.
The growing pains in Illinois cannabis market continue, and May saw sales decline. And there's more fallout from the social equity world. Thomas Howard from Cannabis Legalization News is our correspondent out there. And here's his Illinois Cannabis Report for this week.
What's up? It's me, Tom, from Cannabis Legalization News, here with the Illinois Report for Weed Talk News. There's not much to report out of Illinois. The litigation for the super case of all the craft grow licenses, that's slowly moving its way forward through a meet and confer process, as they're calling it. There's been no update regarding the 55 dispensary license lottery that will be happening sometime in 2023. Everybody who made it in got an email about 3 weeks ago saying they were reviewing the applicants in the lottery and they would get back to us, which will be sometime soon. The legislature in Illinois is also adjourned, didn't pass anything except for IRC 280E reform. So now, at least at the Illinois state level, the dispensaries are not being double taxed. And other than that, more dispensaries are slowly opening. I want to say 26 out of the 192 social equity dispensaries are now open in the state of Illinois, bringing our grand total of dispensaries up to about 136, I believe. And with that, I really don't have much more to report. Tune in to Cannabis Legalization News on YouTube on Sundays, and I will see you when it is 4:20 somewhere. And now back to Jimmy in the studio.
Now it's time for an abbreviated Massachusetts Cannabis Report, now sponsored by C&A Stores in Amesbury and Haverhill. Two friends of Pro Cannabis Media, Stephen Mandilli and Dr. Marion McNabb, presented the findings of her cannabis research on veterans at the State House this week. You see, there's a bill there sponsored by House Rep Michael Sotor and Senator Ryan Fatman that will make it easier for veterans to get their medical marijuana cards for the state and at no charge. Now, if you don't know that our veterans do not have access to medicinal cannabis at the VA, nor can they be recommended that as a treatment for many of the ills that our veterans bring home with them. That bill will receive a hearing next week. At least the state is trying to get it right for the veterans. It looks like there's no money, however, for the social equity applicants. That social equity account reserved for those most impacted by the failed war on drugs is an opportunity to get into the cannabis business, but there's no access to it and there's no money in that account. This story will continue. And finally, if you are at Fenway Park over this weekend, you might see Bertha the bus. If you're a Grateful Dead fan, you know that's the Garcia brand bus that drives around from show to show, spreading the word according to Jerry Garcia and bringing attention to the brand and the cause. Well, anyway, that's the Massachusetts Cannabis Report this week, sponsored by C&A Stores.
The Massachusetts Cannabis Report on We Talk News is supported by C&A Stores, a veteran-owned and family-operated cannabis dispensary with 2 locations in Amesbury and in Haverhill, dedicated to the community north of Boston and to consumers by providing the widest selection of products in the state.
One of the most popular cannabis advocates in the country is Jim Belushi, the actor, and the grower of cannabis in Oregon, plus the musician with the Blues Brothers. Now, last week, one of his Blues Brothers buddies, his brother, Dan Aykroyd, tweeted out that Jim would have a great career in politics. So that could be a possibility. And now he wants to hear from the public about whether or not he should run for a Senate position. Now, I know it will certainly be an improvement over some of the representatives in Washington, D.C. Good luck, Jim. That's We Talk News for this week. We'll be back on July 14th. Until then, remember, it's a whole new world of weed out there. Use it responsibly. It's a whole new world of weed out there, isn't it? Everyone is learning new ways to titrate, ingest, consume, imbibe, and engage with this plant medicine we call cannabis. Hi, I'm Jimmy Young, the founder of Pro Cannabis Media and the host of In the Weeds, and once in a while, the really live business cannabis talk show we call Green Rush on Friday afternoons from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. Eastern. I've been a medical patient in Massachusetts for almost 10 years now. I remember my first trip to a dispensary just outside of Boston, and I told the bud tender I didn't want to smoke it anymore. So I tried edibles, then tinctures, then vaping, and now if I'm going to smoke, I only use the Weegits filtration system. What? The Weegits.com, Weegits, that's weed, W-E-E-D, G-E-T-S.com, is where you'll find the planet's coolest product.
Both cool the smoke from 1300 degrees to just 90 into your lungs. Plus, the maze pipe and pre-roll filters get rid of all the gunk that you just don't want in your lungs if you can help it.
Add in the code of PCMTV and you get 15% off. So just go to Weegits.com and check out the best way to enjoy a cooler smoke with less coughing and hacking and more peace of mind. All that resin and tar is collected in the polyurethane filters that are easy to clean with soap, water, and a few Q-tips. Your lungs will thank you, and so will I.
We are a cultivation through to consumption lifestyle brand for the cannabis industry. Of course, the crown jewel in our product line is the Armoire home grow system. So now with Green Goddess Supply, we can take you everywhere from growing it in the armoire, right through to storing it, consuming it, rolling it, storing it, you name it, A to Z. Our goal is to enable everybody and anybody anywhere to be able to produce their own organic flower quickly, easily, discreetly, and inexpensively.
You would think that it is. However, there's quite a bit of debate right now in the accounting industry when it relates to cannabis with this exact question. I'm part of a few different networking groups that are solely accountants for cannabis companies. And there's been quite a bit of back and forth in those communities and discussion regarding whether 280E, if it went away, if the administration legalized cannabis or took it off of Schedule 1, what would happen? And it could go either way right now. The debate is it could make the accountant's life much easier. That's what a lot of the inexperienced accountants are saying right now, it seems, whereas the accountants that have been in this industry for a while and have gone through the same thing that happened with hemp a few years ago are saying that will make lives more difficult, because when hemp became declassified a while back, the accounting became more complicated.
Safetiva Labs in Westfield is fast becoming the #1 testing lab for cannabis in Western Massachusetts. Safetiva understands the importance for accurate on-time test results for your product. That's why their current compliance panel turnaround time is less than 2 days. That's Safetiva Labs in Westfield. For more information, go to safetiva.com. The Vermont Cannabis Report is supported by another Green Mountain business, Cannatrol, winner of High Times Best Dry Cure System. Check them out at cannatrolls.com.